Malachi was currently standing in an elevator next to a very nervous and fidgety old man. Today, he was scheduled to have a meeting with Luna about Rowan's potential employment at the guild. Rowan had put on the most formal suit he owned and for once, did not reek of cigarettes and depression. "Why are you so nervous, old man?" "Brat. It's Luna Autumn. She's the most beautiful woman in the world and I'm about to walk into her office." Rowan was constantly trying to straighten his clothes and make sure his hair looked presentable. "Keep it in your pants, geezer." "She's mine," Malachi argued. Luna technically wasn't actually his yet, however, the words flew out of his mouth before he even realized it. "You wouldn't know what to do with a woman like that, boy. She's almost twice your age. You're double hers." "I'm only 50. This sudden reveal caused Mal to pause and give Rowan a pitying look. As he looked at his head full of gray hair and face full of wrinkles, he couldn't help but feel bad for the old man. Malachi lightly patted Rowan on the shoulder and said in a voice full of sadness, "It's been a hard 50 years, huh?" Rowan felt like a blood vessel was going to burst in his forehead. "You son of a bi-dash." Ding. The door to the elevator slid open and Malachi hurriedly slipped out, followed by an irate old man. The two arrived directly in front of Luna's office and Malachi hurriedly opened the door. "Bastard. Why didn't you knock?" Rowan wasn't prepared yet. He needed another minute to calm his pulsing heartbeat. Upon entering Luna's office, the pair were greeted with the sweet, melodious sound of her laughter. Both men felt their hearts speed up at the sight of the gorgeous white-haired woman laughing cutely. "I must say, the two of you are really amusing," Luna said as she wiped tears out of her eyes. "I can't remember the last time I laughed like that." Malachi asked in confusion. "What are you talking about?" As a response, Luna picked up her tablet and showed the two the footage she was just watching. "You know we have cameras in the elevators, Mel." Luna giggled. Both men now had embarrassed looks on their faces as if they'd just been caught red-handed. Luna walked right up to Rowan and introduced herself politely. "I am Luna Autumn, thank you for coming today." Rowan was entranced by Luna's feminine movements that oozed grace and charm. In his entire life, he'd never seen someone so effortlessly regal. He reached out to return her handshake, but words continued to elude him. I have one foot in the grave," Mal muttered. Rowan did not hear him however, he assumed that Mal made another joke about him being senile and straightened up his posture. "I am Professor Rowan Ivers, thank you for seeing me today. Shall we sit down?" Luna gestured to the empty couches in her office and the men took a seat. "So, how do the two of you know each other?" Immediately, the two were blindsided. They hadn't really expected such a question, but in hindsight, it wasn't unreasonable of her to ask that. "I'm his grandfather," Rowan blurted out, without much thought. "Oh my god, what the fuck is wrong with you?" Malachi screamed internally. Rowan wished he could take it back as soon as he said it, however it was already too late. Luna looked back and forth between the two men on her couch who were clearly not related. "I see, well at least I know where Mal gets his sense of humor from." She obviously knew that the two were not related, however she trusted him enough to find out how they knew each other later. For all Upsilon Theta. Unbeknownst to her, she had already begun to give Mal special treatment. She's just accepting it? Do we actually look alike? Malachi and Rowan both simultaneously checked their individual skin colors before looking at each other's face. "I was more handsome as a youth. I wonder how long it'll take me to age like that." Seeing the two men whose thoughts were clearly written on their faces, Luna could not resist the urge to smirk a bit. "So they actually are a bit alike, huh?" She made sure to make a note of this for teasing Mal later and decided to continue with the interview. "Now, tell me what you can do for us here at Immortal Moon." Rowan swallowed his nerves and then proceeded to explain his knowledge and how it could be applied to the guild members. Malachi also made sure to comment on the few tricks that Rowan had taught him in their time together. She found the golden flowers to be especially innovative and captivating since the tattoo on her forehead was of the same flower. Luna made sure to ask more questions of her own and by the meeting's end she'd actually learned a few new things about her potential abilities as well. After an hour-long conversation, Luna was finally convinced and welcomed Rowan as an instructor at the guild. As the pair exited the building, the old man was the liveliest Malachi had ever seen him. "Come on, brat. Let's go get a drink." "I can't get drunk." Malachi shook his head. I can. Mal chuckled and prepared to agree to the old man's request when he got a sudden phone call. He felt his whole body tense up when he saw who it was from and his finger trembled as he accepted the call. Mr. Saint? This is Moriarty Memorial Hospital calling to inform you that the patient is awake and responsive. He didn't remember much after that, only that he'd driven to the hospital like a madman. When Mal arrived at the hospital, he was in such a daze that he almost needed to be led by the hand. What would he say? How should he apologize? Should he ask about why she ended up with someone like Derek in the first place? Did it even matter anymore? His mind was embroiled in a storm of emotions. Sir? Sir? The nurse yelled. Ah. Malachi looked up and realized that he had indeed been spacing out and they'd already arrived at their destination. Sorry about that. It's fine, I see it happen a lot. The nurse said as she waved her hand. She's right inside. The nurse waved him goodbye and left while he stared absent-mindedly at the door. He was sure that what was waiting for him was an uncomfortable conversation, but it was one he didn't want to run away from. No time like the present. Malachi opened the door to the hospital room and stepped inside. However, instead of finding Melanie, the person actually sitting in the bed looked more like her older sister. Like Melanie, she had short, black hair that framed her face perfectly and a pair of dark amber eyes. They shared the same creamy white complexion, yet the woman in front of him seemed to be a bit paler than he remembered Melanie to be. She had a beauty mark beside her right eye and despite her slender figure, she also possessed the largest pair of breasts he'd ever seen. Hello. Do I know you? Malachi's heart dropped down to his shoes. He wasn't fazed by the beauty of the woman in front of him, instead he was horrified by her identity. It didn't take a genius to figure out that this was Melanie's mother. Young man? Are you all right? She asked in concern. This handsome young man had entered her room without saying a word and was looking at her like he'd seen a ghost. It was a good thing they were already in a hospital, because she was certain he was going to faint at any moment. Why yeah, I'm fine. He lied. Okay then. Can you tell me who you are? Malachi considered for a moment what to say before he spoke. I'm a friend of Melanie. My name is Malachi. He said with great difficulty. The woman felt her eyes widen at the mention of this young man's name. Earlier today when she woke up, after ensuring that she was relatively healthy, a nurse informed her that her daughter had been admitted to the hospital as well and that all of the fees for their treatments had been paid in full. Naturally, like the good mother she was, she had many questions and the nurse did her best to sate her curiosity. She could only tell her that her daughter was in a coma after sustaining blunt force trauma to the head. She was brought in by someone named Malachi who was supposedly very famous and he offered to pay medical expenses for the both of them. At the end of the story, Melanie's mother Celeste didn't know what to say. Someone was actually kind enough to not only bring her daughter to the hospital, but he'd paid all of their bills as well. Simply saying she was grateful would be an understatement. However, she'd been alive long enough to know that people very rarely do things simply out of the kindness of their hearts. The nurses told me. You've done a lot for my daughter and I. Celeste said gratefully. But I don't understand why someone who's supposedly just a friend would be willing to pay such an enormous amount of money for us. Malachi felt his heart clench even further and he wondered how much he should tell the woman in front of him. Celeste seemed to notice his hesitation, but she did not relent. No matter how hard you think the truth may be, I deserve to hear it. Her words hit like a ton of bricks and Malachi found himself unable to refuse. He pulled up a chair to sit down before he began to tell Celeste the story of how he met her daughter. Melanie and I got partnered together to work on a project for our sociology class. Our professor thought it was funny that our names sounded sort of similar, so he stuck us together. Malachi smirked. Your daughter is quite popular at school, you can always find her surrounded by people who are desperate to get to know her. I thought that she'd just be a friend and nothing more, but as time progressed I started to develop feelings for her. Malachi suddenly realized how embarrassing it was to tell his first girlfriend's mother how he fell in love with her, but he didn't stop. Eventually, I worked up the courage to confess to her, and to my surprise, she actually said yes. To this day, I don't understand why she accepted someone like me. What do you mean someone like you? Celeste suddenly asked. Even I can see that you're extremely attractive and obviously wealthy. Malachi suddenly remembered his divine makeover and pulled out his phone. He quickly found a picture of he and his sister before his change and showed it to Celeste. I got blessed after we broke up. She agreed to be with me when I looked like this. Celeste felt her eyes widen in surprise. The difference between the boy on screen and the man in front of her was like night and day. Anyways, I didn't have much due to my family situation, but I tried to be good to her. When I wasn't working, we were together. We went on dates to the park or anywhere we could find that didn't cost too much. I don't understand. Square root upsilon dot. You sound like the perfect little couple, so why do you seem so sad? Celeste asked. Well, that's because she cheated on me and left me for my boss. Malachi said with great difficulty. What? The mature woman asked in surprise. That didn't sound like her daughter at all. But looking at the face of the young man in front of her, he seemed to be absolutely sure. I'm sorry. Malachi waved away her apology. You might want to wait until the end of the story to decide if I'm still the kind of person who deserves your sympathy. He took a deep breath before he told her about the events that happened after the breakup. From the time where she showed up at his doorstep apologizing, to the day in class when he saw her bruises yet ignored them. He even told her about his special vision that allowed him to check on her, but it was already too late. I didn't want anything to do with her. Truthfully, I was bitter because she broke my heart and I wanted her out of my life completely. The fact that she was being abused didn't matter. I was neglectful and as a result, your daughter is in a coma and it's not certain when she'll wake up. Malachi lowered his head and his long dreads covered up his face that was twisted by guilt. It's not you that should be apologizing to me, I am the one who needs to apologize to you. He said solemnly. Malachi heard the sound of rustling sheets and closed his eyes in preparation of what he was sure was coming. Celeste would certainly strike him and why would she not? Would that not be the very least of what he deserved? Surprisingly, Mal did feel hands on his face, but they weren't hitting him. Celeste took his face in her hands and lifted his head up so that they were looking eye to eye. The two stared at each other, both letting their tears of grief fall to the floor without a word passing between them. They simply watched each other in their most vulnerable state as they agonized over a young girl who was dear to both of them. I don't blame you. Celeste finally broke the silence between them as she spoke with a shaky voice. I know how much you loved my daughter. And despite how much hurt she caused you, in the end you were still the one to save her. Those words made Malachi's tears flow harder because he felt as though they were untrue. He didn't save her, she'd still been hurt. Once again in his life, he was unable to protect someone he cared about. The only difference now was that he'd actually had the power to do it. I know you feel like you didn't do enough, but if you didn't get my daughter to the hospital in time she would have died on that horrible man's floor. In a moment that would be ingrained in Malachi's mind forever, Celeste smiled beautifully despite the tears running down her face. So I should be thanking you instead. Thank you, Malachi. For saving my baby girl, despite all the hurt she caused you. Those words left him stuck and unable to respond, but luckily, Celeste seemed to be expecting that. She wiped her face with her sleeve and tried her best to cleanse herself of tears. I haven't been out of my room since I woke up and frankly, it's a little bit stuffy in here. Malachi looked at her in confusion as he waited to see where she was going with this. It just so happens that I haven't been to see my daughter yet, so why don't we go together? Even though Celeste had asked Malachi if he wanted to go and see Melanie, it didn't seem like she was going to take no for an answer. Before Mal could stop her, the buxom woman rose up from her bed and intertwined her arm with his. Come along now, we don't want to keep her waiting, do we? For a woman who had just gotten out of a coma, Celeste was moving around just fine. She had no problem lugging Malachi all the way to Melanie's room without letting him slip from her grasp even once. But just as the two were about to enter, Malachi finally put up some resistance and stopped the two of them from going further. Ma'am, Call me Celeste. Eh? You make me feel old when you call me ma'am, so just use my name. Okay. Celeste, The mature woman blushed furiously when she realized it had been a very long time since a young man had called her by her first name. It was significantly more embarrassing than she remembered. Malachi was oblivious to her current emotions and continued voicing his discomfort. I don't think I should intrude on your time with your daughter. I mean honestly I'm. Oh, enough. Ow. Celeste suddenly grabbed Malachi by the ear and began to tug on it like she wanted to take it home with her. You're too young to wallow in guilt like this. If you keep this up, your entire life will pass you by before you know it. How can you ever move forward if you're consistently bogged down by memories of the past? I get it, I get it. Can you let me go now? I haven't decided yet. The two attracted a great many stares from others in the hospital, but neither of them seemed to notice that. Malachi was in far too much pain to care, while Celeste never did have a good sense of surrounding awareness. Eventually, the mature woman did release the tall young man, but not before giving him another earful. A man should be more confident and resolute. I'm not telling you to become some cocky asshole or anything like that, but you have to learn how to leave all of your regrets behind and move on. Maybe it was because his ear was still ringing, but Celeste's words had a much more profound effect on Mal than they normally would have. While he did not particularly enjoy being scolded, he had to admit that her words had caused him to see a glaring pattern within his life. For as long as he could remember, Mal had never been able to let any of his mistakes go, no matter how big or small they were. They were all little things that he carried around with him on a daily basis and thought about constantly. He thought living like that would be the only way to avoid repeating his mistakes. But what if he was wrong? Could he learn from his mistakes without hating himself every day? Was it possible to forgive himself for Melanie? What about what happened to Aubrey? Or that time he got beaten up in front of the whole school in 9th grade? Could he forgive himself for the death of his parents? If he was honest, he wasn't sure. But the thought of living a life free of all of his guilty burdens seemed like such a relief that he would be lying if he said that he did not want to try. I get it, thank you, Celeste. Humph. If you're going to say something like that, then the least you could do is look me in the eye when you apologize. Before Malachi could stop her, Celeste reached out and plucked his sunglasses off his face. She wasn't sure what she expected to see, but bright orange eyes that looked like they belonged to some kind of cat were absolutely not it. Malachi immediately closed his eyes and gestured for her to hand him his sunglasses back. They probably scared you a bit, right? I get that a lot. Just as Malachi reached for the glasses, Celeste hid them behind her back and lightly touched Malachi's face. No, they aren't scary at all. I actually find them to be quite beautiful. Malachi was visibly stunned to hear someone other than Say refer to his gift from Bast as beautiful. He wondered if the two women were insane or if everyone else was just rather jumpy. A smile spread across Malachi's face that threatened to flood Celeste's underwear. Thank you for saying so. Maybe I won't hide them from now on. For the first time today, Celeste lost her composure as her face became a much more noticeable shade of red. Malachi of course noticed this change and moved in a bit closer out of worry. Are you all right? You aren't still feeling unwell, are you? I am fine. Celeste finally realized that maybe she'd been acting a little too familiar with this young man who she barely even knew. She pushed open the door to her daughter's room and did not even wait for him to come inside behind her. He's my daughter's ex. I am sure he doesn't want some old woman thinking about him like this. Just as Celeste sat on her daughter's bed, Malachi entered and sat in a chair opposite her. She could not help but notice that Malachi seemed to have listened to her advice and now had a much more composed and confident air about himself. It was a small change, and one that would undoubtedly take time to cultivate, but she noticed it all the same. This is bad. He's much more attractive than before. The two spent an entire hour in Melanie's room. What they talked about was something only the three of them would be allowed to know, but the one thing that was for sure was that Malachi came out of the hospital that day a changed man. Leaving the hospital, Malachi felt lighter than air. He had relieved himself of all of his burdens and inside of Melanie's room, and finally come to accept that he had nothing to feel guilty for. Somehow, hearing the stern words from Melanie's mother herself had been the last piece of the puzzle that he needed to move on. As the day slowly turned into night, he began to feel happier and happier. And there was only one person whom he wanted to share this happiness with. Pulling out his phone, he immediately dialed the number of his beautiful and mature girlfriend. Unfortunately, the voice he heard when the call connected was not one that he enjoyed hearing. Serana, what's up, stepbastard? Immediately, a vein bulged in Malachi's head and his good mood all but disappeared. What the hell kind of name is that? Serana, a fitting one. Why do you have Say's phone? She's in the shower, and I just wanted to take this time to ask a favor of my good friend. I thought I was a bastard. Malachi finally reached his car in the parking lot, but instead of getting in, he sat on the hood of his car while looking up into the night sky. Oh yeah? And what might that be? Can you please introduce me to that guy Ryo Amaki? Malachi immediately rolled his eyes and fought the urge to hang up. I barely know him. Can't you get to know him then? And you can casually mention that you have a hot available friend who's a really big kya. Suddenly, Malachi heard sounds of struggling on the phone, followed by the sound of his beloved girlfriend's voice. Say, what are you doing with my phone? Sarana, trying to make sure that you can have some grandkids. Say, what? Malachi listened to this back and forth ordeal for several minutes and laughed himself to the point of physical exhaustion. Tears were running down his cheeks, his sides were aching, but he had honestly never felt better. Eventually, Say recovered her phone and was praying that Mal hadn't heard all of that when she realized he was still on the line. Honey. You didn't hear any of that, did you? Malachi smiled and contemplated saying no to spare his girlfriend some embarrassment, but ultimately decided that wouldn't be any fun. What do you think our grandkids should call us? Grandpa feels pretty boring, but I think if a kid called me Peepaw, I'd want to kill myself. Honestly. You're not funny. Despite her embarrassment, Say let out a genuine amused giggle that made Malachi's heart speed up. The two spent several minutes talking and enjoying the sound of each other's voices. It wasn't until a few minutes had gone by that Malachi suddenly decided he missed Say too much to be satisfied with a mere phone call. I'm coming over, have you eaten? Yeah? No I haven't, but honey you don't need to dash. I know I don't need to, but I want to. Malachi slipped off the hood of his car and instead opened the door to get inside. Alright honey. I'll be waiting. Square root right angles yen dot. It wasn't intentional, but Say's soft and feminine tone nearly drove her boyfriend wild. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Honey, no speeding. Malachi chuckled before nodding in compliance. Alright, I'll be there in. His words gradually trailed off, as he suddenly felt like he was being watched. Honey? I'll be there in 20 minutes, I guarantee it. Afterwards, Mal hung up the phone and his body was suddenly encased in shadows before he disappeared. On the roof of the hospital, two men in keen dark coats could be seen staring down at the parking lot below. Damn it, he teleported. Could you have set him off somehow? That's not possible. Yes it is. Malachi suddenly said. Both men immediately whirled around to find Malachi leaning against the railing with his arms folded and his eyes unhidden. Malachi briefly glanced at the two men who'd been watching him from the rooftop. One was a bit more tall and muscular than the other, with neatly gelled brown hair and a sharp jawline. His eyes were quite strange and seemed to be glowing a bright purple. He was the one watching me. Malachi realized. Standing next to the tall man was a slightly shorter one who appeared to be equally handsome. He had long dark hair and golden eyes that paired perfectly with his radiant dark skin. His hair was neatly cut into a fade, and he was consistently wearing a charismatic smile. Even though Malachi had never seen these two men before, he knew what organization they represented. The Dark Angels. The Dark Angels are a secret task force consisting of blessed that only deal in blessed-related crimes. They received their name based on their angelic purpose that sometimes became muddled by their violent confrontations. If they had come looking for him, he already knew what it was about. You could feel me watching you? The large man said. That's rather impressive. Is there a reason why you were watching me in the first place? Malachi asked, feigning ignorance. Suddenly, the shorter man walked forward and held out his hand. Nice to meet you, Mr. Saint. My name is Lamont, blessed by Papa Legba. He then pointed to his partner and introduced him as well. This is my partner, Seth, he is the one blessed by Heimdall. Malachi nodded at each of the men before taking Lamont's outstretched hand. Nice to meet you. If you don't mind, can we wrap this up quickly? I have to be somewhere in 20 minutes. Sure. Lamont said with a hearty laugh. We just have two very simple questions. Suddenly, Seth walked forward as if he was trying to intimidate Malachi. What did you do to Arthur Rowland and Derek O'Brien? Maybe it was because Mal hadn't expected him to ask about Arthur, but his face did show traces of surprise when asked about him. What makes you think I have anything to do with the two of them? Malachi asked. Lamont seemingly realized he'd forgotten something important and smacked his head in embarrassment. Sorry. Papa Legba is a Loa in Haitian voodoo who stands at the spiritual crossroads between this world and the next. My blessing allows me to communicate with any spirit who has recently departed, provided I know who I'm looking for. Malachi already did not like the sound of this and contemplated whether or not he should run. It's very difficult for someone to suddenly go missing without a trace from a maximum security penitentiary. So naturally, I was called to investigate and see if our dear serial rapist might be dead. And do you know what I found? He was. Lamont took a slow and steady step forward while Malachi's entire body tensed up. But then something strange happened. Even in death, Arthur's spirit was consumed with so much fear that I couldn't get anything out of him. He merely wailed constantly, professing his apologies for touching two young girls. Care to ask what their names were? Not particularly. Aubrey Saint and Rosaline Ivers. Lamont said casually. Truthfully, that was already enough to suspect Malachi, but then a mere few days later, they got another call about a man who had confessed to all of his crimes and begged to be taken to prison. This time, the man just so happened to be Malachi's former boss. Also, the story of how Malachi Saint randomly appeared in the middle of a hospital while holding the battered body of a woman was not one that went unnoticed. You fancy yourself to be some kind of vigilante? I'm sure that you're aware that such a thing is a crime. Seth said pointedly. Malachi had no real defense, they already knew about everything that he'd done. In retrospect, he should have been a bit more cautious when dealing with Derek, but Lamont's ability to locate deceased spirits was something he could not have anticipated. The abilities and appearances of the Dark Angels were all highly confidential. Even if you saw one of them out in the street and knew that they were a blessed, you would not know that they were an agent unless you saw their signature black cloaks with the symbol of wings across the back. Malachi figured that maybe this was just an inevitable fate. If he was honest, he did not regret killing Arthur or lobotomizing Derek, and if he had to go back, he wouldn't do anything differently. Even if he was still new to not feeling guilt, he knew that those two men did not deserve his sympathy. So, what happens now? Malachi said with a sigh. Oh, well, we can't actually prove that you did anything to Derek, leaving only the murder charge for Mr. Arthur. But... Lamont suddenly pulled out a black card from his coat and handed it to Malachi. On it was a simple smiley face with the words, "You've been recruited, for all Epsilon Upsilon. This is a joke, right? I told you to knock it off with those stupid cards." Seth exclaimed. With a name like the Dark Angels, we need a bit of lightness every now and then. Otherwise, everyone would think that we're all serious all the time. Lamont defended. We are supposed to be serious all the time. I know, and that shit sucks. I'm trying to change it. Malachi could barely hear the arguing going on amongst the two men, his mind was still swimming with jumbled thoughts and emotions. Confusion. Relief. Nausea. Can the two of you please explain what the hell is going on? Finally, the two stopped arguing as they cleared their throats. Seth, well, it's like you read on that dumbass card. Your dash. Lamont, your mother. Can you be an adult for 1 second? Lamont merely rolled his eyes and did not say anything further, although he seemed like he still had something to get off his chest. Seth sighed before finally turning back to Malachi. Normally, we would arrest you. But our organization feels as though that would be a waste, considering your enormous potential. As such, we are willing to allow you to serve out your sentence as a field agent. Lamont nodded as he continued his explanation. You'll be able to continue living out your normal life, and no one has to know that the most famous man in the world murdered someone in cold blood. But, you will be closely monitored. If you murder someone outside of a field assignment, that's it. You're done. Malachi only needed a moment to think about it before nodding in agreement. The reality was that a situation like this was already a miracle, and he was incredibly lucky. He almost had to leave behind Aubrey, Say, and Luna. If it meant that he got to stay beside them, he would align himself with all of the gods of evil if he had to. I got it. He said after a brief moment of thought. What do I have to do? Nothing. We'll come find you when we're ready. Both men suddenly turned around and leapt of the building, leaving Malachi alone with only the familiar night sky and lingering questions over the future. In Alex Heller's luxurious penthouse office, the man himself was seated calmly at his desk. Just as he prepared to close out his computer for the night and go home, the doors to his office were suddenly flung open. Surprisingly, he didn't even bother to get mad. There was only one person who was bold enough to enter his office like this unannounced. Walking boldly into his office was a woman with waist-length dark hair and mesmerizing violet eyes. She had a pair of full cherry lips and a figure that was both enchanting and dangerous. "I was just about to head home, dear, you didn't have to come and get me." The woman did not respond and instead walked seductively behind Alex's desk and found her place in his lap. "I've got good news for you." "Oh? Do tell." The woman removed a small flash drive from between her cleavage and inserted it into Alex's computer. She then began to pull up a list of files, and Alex's eyes widened when he saw whose name was attached to them. "Honestly, I don't know why you bothered with that crusty old deadbeat. The kid's so naive that it's honestly a bit concerning." Alex did not seem to hear the words of the woman in his lap and instead began to send all of the files to his phone. "We need to release these right now. By morning, that bastard will be dash." The woman suddenly grabbed Alex's phone and held her finger up to her lips. "Easy now, tattletale. Why are you always so wasteful?" "What are you talking about, Joanne?" The woman sighed before leaning her body back into Alex's chest. "Honestly, it's a good thing you're pretty. Now that I have him, I want to use him a bit, let him catch a few outstanding criminals and the like. And then, if you want, we can send him on a mission that he will not come back from." Alex sighed before putting on his signature movie star smile. "Honestly, I should have just come to you in the first place." Joanne shook her head in denial. "You know that we have to keep our organization as legitimate as possible. There was nothing that I could have done before, but now that he has placed himself in my hands, I'm more than capable of helping you." Alex nodded before whispering seductively in Joanne's ear. "Still, you've done a good job. How would you like to be rewarded, my love?" This earned an involuntary shudder from her, and she quickly made her request known. "I want them to hear me from all the way downstairs. You understand what that means, right?" "I do indeed." Alex suddenly bent Joanne over his desk and ripped her tight black dress. Tattooed on her back were the dark wings of an angel along with their intertwined initials. "I'll be sure to make it hurt as much as possible." Malachi had finally arrived at Say's home at exactly his 20-minute deadline. "Thank God I can teleport." Malachi knocked on Say's door and it only took a few seconds before she answered. Wearing a comfortable-looking sweater dress that perfectly complemented her voluptuous figure, her beauty was almost great enough to give Malachi a nosebleed. "You're here," she said excitedly. "I'm not late, am I?" As a response, Say stood on her tiptoes and gave him a small peck on the lips. "You're just in time, honey." Immediately, his mood showed signs of a drastic improvement. He didn't want to think about the organization he'd just been blackmailed into joining, for right now all he wanted was to ogle this beautiful mature woman for the rest of the night. Say quickly pulled him into her house and closed the door behind them. The two quickly made their way to the dining table where they began to unwrap the food that Malachi had brought. Just as the two of them prepared to sit down and eat, Serana emerged from her room, summoned by the smell of food. "Oh. Mal brought blue lobster? Don't mind if I dash." "Say, we're having a dinner date, Serana." "Malachi, you're not invited." "What? Then what am I supposed to eat? There's some cereal in the cupboard?" "Mom." The two of them laughed in amusement as Serana's cheeks puffed out more and more. "We're just joking, Serana, your food is in the kitchen," Malachi said. "But we really do want to be alone," Say reminded. "Humph, I didn't want to eat with you two lovebirds anyway," Serana said as she left the two of them alone. Once the sounds of ravenous chewing were heard from the kitchen, the two chuckled in silence as they began to enjoy their own dinner. Eventually, the two moved to the couch and nestled closely together as they drank wine and laughed. Finally, after spending a lot of time observing him, Say questioned Mal on his recent changes. "You seem a bit different tonight, honey. Is there something the matter?" She couldn't help but notice that Mal was no longer wearing his glasses and seemed to be a bit more quiet than usual. Even though he seemed to be okay, she could not help but think there may have been something wrong. "There isn't," he said as he pulled her into his embrace. He did not want to worry Say with talk of what had happened tonight. While he had already accepted it as a reality and a consequence, he knew that she would have a hard time with him undertaking such a dangerous job. Entering into Gates was one thing, as most monsters lack intelligence and strategic thinking. However, there was no limit to the amount of traps and tricks that humans could play. Any one of which could be the reason why Malachi's life was cut short. Say wanted to press harder, but with Malachi's warm body against hers and his inviting scent filling her nostrils, she couldn't. And when Malachi brought his lips down to meet hers, her mind was totally cleansed of unnecessary thoughts. Normally, Say would not hold their kisses for long before she inevitably pulled away. But tonight for some reason, she not only did not run, but she also let her hands wander. Malachi's eyes became as big as saucers as he simultaneously checked with his hearing to make sure that Surana had gone back upstairs. When he was certain that they were alone, he pushed Say back onto the couch and hovered above her, his mind focused on only one thing. Say, do you? Say's heart was thumping so wildly she felt like she'd just gone for a 10-mile run. The image of Malachi hovering over her with eyes filled with burning desire was almost too much to bear. If she was honest, she didn't know why she hadn't pulled away from him earlier. Maybe part of her reasoning could be blamed on the wine, but the way her hands wandered so shamelessly along his body was another thing entirely. Say do you dash? Don't say it. MMF? Before Malachi could finish his overwhelmingly embarrassing question, Say threw her hands over his mouth to seal it shut. What should I do? I just wanted to touch him a little bit more, but I honestly wasn't expecting it to be that easy to set him off. Say did not realize just how great Malachi's attraction to her was. He had to suppress himself not to jump on her in the middle of a simple conversation, so running her hands up his abdomen was certainly going to have a more pronounced effect. Say's face began to get redder by the second, and she wondered what she should do in this situation. It wasn't that she didn't want it to, but there were a great many things that she wanted to do in preparation first. She hadn't shaved down there recently, and she was also worried about what he would think of her body when she was fully undressed. Malachi's body was literally a gift from the gods themselves, and in comparison, Say was just some old woman in average shape. What if he saw her completely naked and realized that she wasn't that attractive? As Say spiraled deeper into paranoia, Malachi gently removed her hands from his face and pinned them behind her head. Before Say could say anything, Malachi's lips were once again on hers, and she lost her train of thought. By now, Malachi had given up on talking and just wanted to act. If Say wanted to stop this, she could have at any time. But seeing as how she didn't, Malachi knew that she must have wanted it as well, yet been too scared to act for some reason. Malachi finally broke their kiss and released his girlfriend's arms from his grasp. His lips gently grazed against the skin of her neck as he tried his best to take things as slowly as possible for the both of them. As Malachi's hands found their way onto Say's thighs, she let out a surprised flinch before ultimately allowing him to continue. As he slowly lifted her dress, Say suddenly stopped him at the last moment before her already wet panties would be exposed. Wait. I'm not dash. Say was going to tell Malachi that she wasn't young anymore so he should lower his hopes a bit, but he would not allow her to belittle herself for even a second. You're perfect just the way you are. There is nothing for you to be afraid of, Say. Because Say knew that his words were not just stemming from simple lust, the effect was that much more exaggerated. The mature beauty melted like butter, and her grip on his hands loosened immediately. Malachi pulled the gorgeous woman out of her sweater and her naked body was fully revealed. Say had on an enchanting black lace bra and panty set that almost gave her 20-year-old boyfriend a nosebleed. Slowly, he began to leave a trail of kisses all the way down her body, from her neck to her chest and eventually her thighs. Spreading her legs apart, the full scent of her arousal hit him dead on, and he wondered how anything in this world could possibly be so stimulating. Honey, what are you Say quickly covered her mouth to hold in a moan as Mal kissed her leaking vagina through her panties. Mal quickly moved the damp garments out of the way and began licking her vagina with fervent desire. Say's body trembled as she experienced a man going down on her for the first time in all of her 37 years of life. It took everything she had not to cry out in pleasure from the unfamiliar yet wonderful sensations that were spreading all throughout her mind and body. As her sweet and sticky taste filled Mal's mouth, his new predatory instincts finally revealed themselves. I want to taste more. I want her to feel better. She is mine and mine alone. HNN. MMH. Mal began to focus more on Say's clit as he expertly slid his tongue underneath the hood and began to lick much rougher than before. The sudden increase in technique along with the direct assault of one of her sweet spots resulted in a near-instant orgasm that nearly made Say black out. She was still trying to be quiet with her daughter resting upstairs, but Mal was making such a thing more and more difficult by the minute. He's supposed to be a virgin, so why is he so good at this? Finally, Say used the last of her waning strength to try and push Malachi's head away. When he looked up, he could see that her eyes had a faint glossy look and there was a small trickle of drool spilling from her full lips. "Honey, you're so mean." Unable to withstand her charm, Malachi again brought his lips to hers and finally began to remove his own clothes. With every bit of his flesh that became exposed, Say's face became redder and redder. She had seen him shirtless a number of times before, but tonight was the first time she got to peek down below. When his manhood was finally freed from the suffocation of his jeans, Say's eyes became as big as saucers and she wondered whether or not she was still under the effects of the wine. Say initially had wanted to go to nursing school a few years ago, so she knew quite a bit about anatomy. But even if she did not have that expansive knowledge, she would still know that her boyfriend's was well above average. Both the length and thickness made her feel like she was looking at an iron rod instead of a male appendage, and she began to wonder if it would even fit inside of her. As Malachi positioned himself at her narrow and wet entrance, she once again had to stop him, though not for the same reasons as before. "Can we go to your place instead? If you put that inside of me, I don't think I will be able to hold back my voice anymore." Malachi briefly checked to make sure that his home was empty and once he confirmed that it was, he picked up Say in his arms and the two of them sank into the shadows at his feet. A few moments later, Serana came down from her room to grab something to drink from the fridge. However, when she passed by the living room where the happy couple were a few moments ago, a strange yet familiar smell filled her nostrils. Going to investigate, her face quickly became an unhealthy shade of green as she found the remnants of their steamy first time. A large wet stain on the couch, the smell of a woman's pheromones in the air, and the hastily discarded clothes of both of them laying sadly on the floor. Oh gods! Blurg! The poor girl ultimately lost the battle against her stomach as she threw up the dinner she'd just had all over the living room floor. Seriously. I have got to move out. Malachi and Say appeared soundlessly in his bedroom and did not even bother to turn on the lights. Their bodies were illuminated by only the glow of the city outside the window, allowing them both to see just how aroused each other were. Malachi lay Say gently on the bed and slowly crawled on top of her. Her heart was beating so loud that he could hear it even without his enhanced senses. He knew it had been a long time for her, so he made up his mind to give her the best experience possible. This is a bit embarrassing. I'm the one with experience, yet I feel like I'm being led by you. Say said with a shy smile. Is that a bad thing? No. I just wish I could show you the charm of an older woman is all. She replied jokingly. Malachi smiled tenderly when he heard Say give such a cute reason for her shyness. Don't worry, I can assure you that you've been doing that since the day I met you. He brought his lips down to hers once again and Say felt a bolt of electricity run through her body when she felt his member knocking at her slick entrance. Without breaking their kiss, Malachi pushed his hips forward and finally made Say his woman. HNNGH. Say let out an involuntary moan as Malachi's tip slowly delved deeper and deeper into her depths. It had been quite a long time since Say had been intimate with anyone, but she was absolutely certain that she had never been stretched open this widely before. Despite Malachi's massive size, she was accommodating him with relatively little pain or discomfort. In fact, she felt herself quickly becoming addicted to the sensation of all of her sweet spots being stimulated at once. Even though Say was moaning loudly already, Mal was still not satisfied and wanted her to be louder. Unclasping her bra, he revealed two bountifully large breasts with pink, inverted nipples. His mouth quickly moved from her lips to her breasts, and he began sucking on them until her nipples became fully erect. Ah. Honey, you're too rough. Say had suddenly began to feel a familiar yet new sensation coursing through her body, and at first, she didn't know what it was. However, she quickly put two and two together to realize that she was very nearly reaching her first ever orgasm from intercourse. But there was a problem. Say had a rather embarrassing habit that she was hoping to take to her grave. She had not expected Malachi to see this side of her so soon or even at all for that matter, but the sensation she was experiencing right now was a loud indicator that she was going to squirt. Wait, I think I'm going to pee. Mal heard the words coming out of Say's mouth, but unfortunately it only served to make him even more excited. He wasn't proud of it, but he had watched more than enough pornography in his life to know that Say was already going to come. The thrill of knowing that he was making her feel good enough to lose all composure like this was so intoxicating that he accidentally bit down on her nipple a bit harder than normal. A sudden jolt of pain mixed with her already overwhelming pleasure was more than enough to push Sei over the edge, and she finally released everything she had built up inside. Mel, I'm coming. Sei's eyes rolled around lazily inside of her skull as a torrent of liquid splashed onto Mel's abdomen. The young man finally pulled out of her for a moment to admire his handiwork. Sei's entire body was shivering as if she'd just come in from the cold. Upsilon. Her cheeks were red, her breathing was heavy, and her vagina was still twitching as if it was still greedily asking for more. Honestly, how is it fair for anyone to be this enticing? Mel said through shallow breaths. He gingerly flipped Sei over so that her backside was facing him. She made no moves to stop him, either because she was physically incapable or because she also wanted this feeling to continue. But judging by how she arched her back of her own volition, Mel guessed that it was probably the latter. In a single fluid motion, Malachi buried himself to the base inside of Sei and found himself pressing against her womb. Sei let out another animalistic cry of pleasure as she nearly blacked out from the sudden thrust, and it took all of her willpower to remain conscious as Mel continued to strike against that same spot. Malachi was sure that if the walls of his apartment weren't so thick, he would undoubtedly be receiving several noise complaints tomorrow. Sei's gentle and motherly disposition had vanished without a trace, and all that was left behind was a woman embroiled within the throes of ecstasy as she had fulfilling sex for the first time in her life. If you'd asked her before, Sei would tell you that she was a person who did not particularly enjoy lewd acts. During her marriage to Minoru, she really only did so as a way to express her love and out of a small feeling of obligation. But in the bed of a man who was almost 20 years younger than her, Sei's eyes were being opened to an entirely new world as Malachi brought her to her fourth orgasm in under 20 minutes. Honey, you feel so good, I can't stand it. Leaning down, Malachi placed a bit of his weight on Sei's back as his hands traveled up her body to cup her breasts. Sei, She immediately understood what was going to happen when she felt his member twitching inside of her. Inside. I want it inside of me. Malachi did not wait for further instruction as he came hard inside of Sei. The sudden influx of a large volume of warm and thick liquid was enough for Sei to reach her own orgasm, and the moans of both of them filled the air. For a few seconds, both of them remained motionless as they came down from the high of such a fulfilling release. But then, Sei realized that Malachi's erection still had not gone down, and he even seemed to be harder than before. You can still keep going? She asked, her tone containing a mixture of surprise and something else he couldn't quite decipher. Malachi opened and closed his mouth several times as he tried to decide how to answer. Despite his lust, he hadn't forgotten that Sei was still human. There were a laundry list of stories about Blessed getting too engrossed in sex with human partners and injuring them accidentally. From the way Sei was breathing, he could tell that she was already tired, so he felt bad for needing more. However, Sei took him completely by surprise when she showed a lustful smile that made his heart skip a beat. I'm actually glad. I still wanted to do a bit more as well. With his last thread of reasoning snapped, Malachi lifted Sei up by her waist and spun her around so that her legs were wrapped around his waist. Shame on me then, he said with a warm smile. I was thinking of stopping before my girlfriend was fully satisfied. In response, Sei chuckled cutely as she locked her arms behind his neck. Indeed, shame on you. As punishment, you can make it up to me by going at least 4 more times. How about all night? Foo, that's even better. The two lovers passionately kissed as Mal began effortlessly lifting Sei up and down on his dick. With every thrust, Sei released a muffled moan into his mouth as her heart and mind were assailed with the most dreamlike bliss. This man. I love him so much. Despite his promise to go all night long, Malachi and Sei only lasted another 8 rounds, before Sei became too tired to continue. The two found the driest spot possible in his bed and fell asleep, holding each other while dreaming of the extremely pleasurable night they'd just had. In the morning, Sei proved to be much more clingy and expressive than before. Malachi had to get up early in the morning for training, and instead of staying in bed, she decided to get up alongside him and followed him around like a cute little duckling. He was a bit rougher on her last night towards the end, so he fully expected for her to spend the day sleeping or even have some difficulty walking. Surprisingly, she was perfectly fine other than some faint soreness, and as such she was more than happy to keep going. Evidently, the sex drive of an older woman was nothing to sneeze at. They had sex twice in the shower. Once while changing the sheets. And another time while making breakfast. After cleaning themselves up yet again, Malachi finally prepared to leave for the morning, and Say was making things as difficult as ever. Both of them were intertwined by the door, kissing passionately and unwilling to let each other go. Finally, Say half-heartedly pushed Malachi away so as not to make him late. "You should go. I'll be here when you get back." Hearing those words put a large smile on Mal's face as he pulled Say in for one last hug. "Are you sure you don't want to go home first? It's no problem for me to take you." "No. I don't want to waste any time when you come back." Mal briefly considered canceling his entire schedule for the day. However, just as he thought about spending the entire day in bed with his beautiful girlfriend, the door to his apartment unlocked and Aubrey and Aisha walked in holding hands. As soon as the two siblings saw each other, their minds immediately went into analysis mode. For Aubrey, it was relatively simple to decipher. Mal was not only holding Say with a much more possessive and loving embrace than before, but the mature beauty was currently covered in kiss marks on both sides of her neck. It also didn't help that she was only wearing an oversized t-shirt that barely covered her large bottom and no bra. Aubrey would have to be an idiot to not know something had happened. Say's face quickly became a bright shade of scarlet as she covered her enormous chest and started hiding behind Malachi. What is she going to think of me now that she's seen me dressed like this?" she screamed internally. She normally would have put on some better clothes, but the rather lustful morning that the two of them shared left her unable to think about anything else. Say embarrassingly grabbed the back of her boyfriend's shirt, only to realize that he was frozen as well. Right angles y. Malachi had not taken his eyes off his sister since she entered the room, and he was seriously having trouble coming to terms with what he was seeing. Currently, Aubrey only had on an oversized hoodie that said, Death Row Records. Normally that wouldn't have been anything to be alarmed about, but there was just one problem. That hoodie didn't belong to Aubrey, it belonged to Aisha. Malachi couldn't see any kiss marks on his sister's neck due to her long curly hair, but he could smell his best friend all over her. The pair had also walked in holding hands and giggling cutely like a pair of lovebirds. At the same time, both siblings came to a staggering conclusion. "Why, you were having sex?" Evidently, Aubrey was not expecting to be found out like this, and her cheeks immediately became hot. I am an adult and I can do whatever I like." Before Malachi could respond, his sister grabbed his arm and began pushing him and Aisha out the door. "Don't the two of you have training to get to or something? Get going already." Aubrey closed the door with a slam after blowing a small kiss at Aisha, which only served to worsen Malachi's headache even further. For a moment, the two of them stood motionlessly in the hallway as neither of them really knew what to say. Ultimately, Aisha decided to break the silence since Mal had been blindsided by all of this. "Sorry. It just kind of happened and don't worry about it," Malachi said with a sigh. "She's right, she's an adult and she can do whatever she likes." He suddenly gave his best friend a sideways glance. "Even if I do think she has some rather questionable taste, What did you say, you piece of shit?" Aisha asked with a smile that was not a smile. "Joking," Malachi said with a smile. "I'm glad she's with someone who'll take care of her." Aisha recognized the amount of trust her best friend was placing in her, and she couldn't help but feel a bit warm inside. Their relationship wasn't really a mushy one, so she didn't express her feelings to him, but she felt incredibly touched in that moment. As the two of them got into the elevator, a small silence fell over them before Aisha asked the burning question between them. "Aisha, so, you had sex last night, huh?" "Malachi, you did too evidently." "Aisha, how was it?" "Malachi, she was incredible. It was even more addicting than I could have imagined." "You?" "Aisha, she was really delicious, easily the best I've ever had." Again, the pair fell into a long silence, before exchanging a small fist bump and a light-hearted taunt. "Simp." After Malachi and Aisha were thrown out by Aubrey, she and Say were left alone in the apartment and fell into an awkward silence. However, that was quickly dispersed when the young girl started sniffing the air like a bloodhound. "You guys made breakfast? Is there any left?" Still covering her chest, Say nodded with her trademark motherly smile. "There is. Do you?" "Yes." Aubrey quickly interlocked her arms with her future sister-in-law and made her way towards the kitchen. In a flash, the young girl had piled her plate high with delicious-looking food and prepared to dig in, only to stop herself at the last moment. "Aubrey? Aren't you going to eat?" Say asked. "Your brother and I made it together, and I must say that it's pretty incredible." It was a miracle that nothing was burnt since they weren't exactly focused on cooking the entire time. A helpless smile formed on Aubrey's lips as she slowly began prodding her food with her fork. "I think, maybe I should go on a diet." Say looked at Aubrey's youthful and charming figure and suppressed the urge to laugh out loud. "Sweet girl, why would you think that?" The young girl's face showed traces of embarrassment as she recalled last night's events in great detail. "Well, Aisha has a really nice body, you know. I guess I just want to measure up a bit, I guess." Say's face showed traces of understanding as she also recalled Malachi's body that was much more impressive than her own. She could understand Aubrey feeling slightly inferior, but at the end of the day, her worries were completely unfounded. "I think that may be the curse of those of us who are in relationships with these special beings. We cannot help but compare ourselves to them and see exactly how far behind we are." Unconsciously, Aubrey lowered her head as she thought of the massive societal and physical difference between herself and Aisha. "But I've learned that the best way to overcome that doubt is to recognize the fact that no matter how different we may seem from them, they can still find beauty and attraction even in us ordinary people." This was a lesson that Say had learned intensely after last night's events. Malachi had filled her with so much of his love and essence that she would never have doubts over his attraction to her ever again. In her entire life, not once had she ever been loved so completely like that. Say gently took Aubrey's hand and gave her signature motherly smile. "You are a very beautiful girl, and I'm sure that Aisha sees that as well. There is no reason for you to think of yourself as lesser when compared to anyone, much less the one you're supposed to be in a relationship with." Before Aubrey knew it, a small tear had fallen from her eye. Laughing in embarrassment, she quickly wiped her face and tried to compose herself. I am sorry. It's just been a minute since I've heard something like that." Before this moment, Aubrey had yet to realize just how much she missed her mother. Or maybe she always knew and she had simply been keeping such thoughts buried. But the honest and caring words of Say had dredged up old memories and left her feeling a bit overwhelmed. While she did not see her brother's girlfriend as a replacement for her mother, the reality was that she had been missing an older woman in her life whom she could look up to. Say quickly took the young girl in her arms and gave her a reassuring hug. "You should talk to Aisha about how you're feeling. I'm sure she can wipe away your fears better than I could." Upsilon. Theta. "I will. Thank you, Say." After embracing each other for another few moments, Say picked up Aubrey's fork and placed it back into her hands. "Now, why don't you eat as much as you like while you tell me how things progressed so fast with you and Aisha?" It's kind of a long story." Don't worry, I have time." At the Immortal Moon Training Center, Nina, Opal, Bianca, and Luna were all standing around with their eyes glued to the back of one particular member. "Doesn't he seem a bit different today? It's strange, he suddenly feels a lot more manly. I thought I wanted him before, but now I absolutely have to have him." The object of the girls' attention was naturally Malachi. Currently, he and Rowan were engaged in a deep conversation that held all of their focus. "I can't quite explain it, he just feels more mature all of a sudden," Bianca said with a burning hunger in her eyes. The look she was giving the young man was so intense, the other three women around her believed that she was planning to force herself on him. While Malachi did not seem different on the surface, the women around him had noticed some small but glaring changes. Just as Bianca had pointed out earlier, there was an aura of maturity that now surrounded Malachi that wasn't present before. It was as if he had suddenly become a man overnight. Luna was almost certain that she knew what happened and as a result, she was feeling slightly jealous. She made a small mental note to call Say personally and get all of the details about last night from her. Suddenly, all of the shadows within the room began to vibrate before rushing towards Malachi. They traveled up the length of his body before congealing on his outstretched hands. Dark shadowy claws coated his fingertips and both Malachi and Rowan had satisfied smiles on their faces. "I gotta say, Mal, this is really impressive," Rowan admitted. "This opens up a whole new avenue of capabilities for you in the future." In response, Malachi merely showed a small smile as he carefully analyzed his new ability. "Takes quite a bit of concentration though, so I don't know how much I'll get to use it in the future. Can't be out here putting myself and others at risk just because I want to look cool." Malachi lowered his hands, and the shadows dispersed almost immediately. Letting out an exhausted sigh, Malachi looked up to see Rowan staring at him intently. He had also noticed how his supposed grandson had matured overnight, and just like Luna, he had come to the same conclusion. This brat. Lost your virginity, huh? Excuse me? You can't hide it from me, kid. The only way for someone as loud and energetic as you to become this mature and thoughtful is if they've had their pickle tickled. Malachi stared hard at Rowan as if he couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. You're crazy. And you're suddenly tolerable. Unlike everyone else, Mal hadn't actually noticed that he'd changed. If he had to put how he was feeling into words, he'd say, relaxed. As if all of his worries that had been bogging him down for so long were finally put to bed. While he wouldn't say that sex with Say was solely to blame for his change in attitude, the reality was that it did have a rather sizable impact. Suddenly, everything that had ever occurred before the moment they lay down together no longer mattered. The only thing of any importance to him now was that he continued to experience that same dreamlike bliss that he felt this morning. Not solely because of the sex, but because of the dreamlike bliss he felt from doing nothing but loving and being loved. He had to protect this happiness and sense of peace with everything he had, leading him to make another decision regarding his future. There is no way in hell I can stay in service to the Dark Angels. No man wants to live his life under the thumb of someone else. And naturally, Malachi was not an exception to this rule. He had yet to receive any contact from this shadowy organization and did not know when to expect them. But whenever they did contact him, he had already decided that he would utilize everything he had solely for the goal of escape. He would carry out orders like a good little soldier for the time being, while also simultaneously looking for a way to free himself. Or maybe I can just wait for those supposed worse things to wipe them all out for me, he thought with a chuckle. Bang! Due to Malachi's lapse in concentration, he received a swift kick in the chest from Aisha that nearly knocked the wind out of his body. Don't lose focus, she mocked casually. Damn, that was nice, he admitted. But you know I always have to get my lick back. Executing a sweeping low kick, Aisha naturally jumped to avoid it and fell right into his trap. With lightning-enhanced reflexes, Malachi launched another kick from below right into his opponent's stomach, sending her flying back a few feet. She hit the ground with a thud and took her time getting back up, signaling Mal's victory in their spar. Wanting to gloat a bit, he innocently stood over the sprawled-out Aisha and smiled down at her proudly. Looking a little fragile down there, Aisha. Was I too rough? For some reason, she found him to be significantly more annoying today than he normally was. So naturally, she had to get him back just a bit, right? If this is your idea of rough, then I'm sure Say was bored beyond belief last night, she replied with an evil smile. Almost immediately, a vein began to bulge in Malachi's forehead and he held up his hand that was already crackling with black lightning. Good joke. Want your reward? Suddenly, Aisha was no longer laughing and she slowly began to crawl backwards on the ground. Wait Mal, I was just joking. I'm sure you're a certified sex machine and I KYAA. Initially, Mal was only planning to threaten her a bit before letting her go. But her horribly aggravating apology earned her a small shock of 4,000 volts of electricity. After Aisha was sufficiently energized, Malachi saw that her appearance had taken a rather noticeable alteration. Pinning her down with his foot, he immediately pulled out his phone and began taking pictures of her electric new hairstyle. You look like a little dandelion. I'll kill you, Saint. Not if I make a wish that you won't. Gaha. Luna chose that moment to walk up to the pair, with Rowan following closely behind. Alright you two, that's enough for the day. Luna briefly glanced at Aisha, who was still on the ground fuming and could not help but find that she resembled her magical beast after being dried off from the bath. Before she knew it, she was also taking out her phone to get a picture or two. Lady Luna, why? I'm sorry, Aisha, you're just so cute like this, she said through a snicker. It took a few more minutes for Malachi to let Aisha up and once she immediately went on the warpath. Unfortunately for her, her target was a rather nimble man with the ability to teleport. Before Aisha could repay Mal for the humiliation she'd suffered, he was sinking into the shadows at his feet and waving goodbye. I'll play with you later, Aish. I've gotta head home and show Aubrey these pictures real quick. Malachi. Toodles. With a final teasing goodbye, Mal had left the training center and left behind Aisha, Luna, and Rowan. Arg, I'm going to kill him. He thinks he can treat me like this just because he's finally getting some? I'll turn him into a eunuch. Knew it. Rowan thought in satisfaction. Damn it. I knew it was true. Luna thought in annoyance. While she was the one who suggested that they take things at a slower pace, that didn't mean that she didn't want to be with him as well. But unlike Say, Luna had quite a bit of baggage that she needed to sort out first. She did not want to taint a new relationship with unpleasant ghosts from her past. As she left the training room with Rowan in tow, she silently lamented the fact that she was still being weighed down after all of this time. Why did healing have to have such a stringent process? After heading home to embarrass Aisha and indulge in Say a bit more, he dropped his girlfriend off at home before heading off to college. As he strode casually to his class, his relaxed yet confident steps attracted the attention of anyone he walked past. Although he himself remained oblivious to this fact. Making his way to his classroom, he found his seat next to Serana and gave her a calm friendly smile. What's good, Sarah? Man whore. She responded coldly. Unprepared for the sudden hostility, Mal blinked his eyes several times in confusion before realizing a potential cause. In their passionate excitement, Mal and Say had casually left their clothes on the living room floor for almost an entire day. No doubt Serana had seen them and likely been traumatized as a result. Sorry? Fuck off. In the end, he had to make a promise to buy her lunch for the next month and introduce her to Ryo Amaki before she calmed down. Although, Mal still felt like she was holding on to some inner hostility, but ultimately he had no proof. When the professor walked in, class finally began and he started it off with announcing Mal's worst nightmare. Alright guys, it's project time. This is worth 40% of your grade, so you'll have to do your best, alright? Or don't, and take my class again. It doesn't really matter to me, I'll get paid either way. Just when Malachi thought things couldn't get any worse, Dr. Andrews proved that they very well could. You'll be working in randomized pairs for this assignment, so I'll call out the names and then begin explaining the details of your assignment. Serana Ehara and Walter Michaels. Shit. God damn it. Both Malachi and Serana cursed their luck as they realized that they weren't going to be paired up together to do the project. Both students were fairly smart and they worked very well together, ensuring that they would have turned in a great assignment and had fun along the way. But Professor Andrews had unfortunately dashed all their hopes and dreams of a smooth ride. Since they were the smartest in the class, the chances of them doing all of the work for their partner was almost a certainty. Serana could already see that the oaf she's been partnered with was so excited that he nearly jumped out of his chair. Leaving Malachi alone in the wind and anxiously waiting to see who his partner would end up being. When the professor got to Mal's name, he briefly paused to search for him and became awash with fear when he realized that he was no longer wearing his sunglasses. And Malachi. About what I said before, about the glasses, you don't need to pay that any mind. You're free to put them on if you like. He said with a nervous smile. Please. Put the goddamn glasses on so that I can get through a class without feeling terrified. Unfortunately, Mal simply gave him a confused stare as he rested his chin in his palm. Sensing hopelessness, Dr. Andrews just decided to try to get through the rest of class without ruining his underwear. Alright, Mal, your partner is. In the seconds before Malachi's partner was announced, every student in the class held their breath. The girls in the class desperately wanted to be paired up with Mal, and they weren't exactly hiding it. Their intense stares were piercing the body of their teacher, as if they were trying to will him to say their name and set them up for a possible marriage. The guys were desperately hoping to be paired up with Malachi so as to leech off his meteoric fame. Malachi had always made himself unavailable before, but if they were forced to be paired together, they could use this as an opportunity to get in good with him and skim some of the benefits of his fame and fortune. Someone like Malachi was certain to have plenty of women around, so if they became friends with him, they'd surely receive some of the spillover poon, right? With their motives aligned, they all held their breaths as they waited to hear their names fly out of the professor's mouth. Annalise Gray. The disappointment among the students was immeasurable and they slunk down into their seats in a depressed manner, not even caring to hear who their actual partners were. Malachi's eyes scanned the room for the girl who was supposed to be his partner and found her sitting in her usual seat by the window. I thought my luck was bad, but it looks like yours was even worse. Wasn't expecting you to get paired up with the scary goth girl. Serana whispered jokingly. Shut up. Mal said as he rolled his eyes. There's nothing wrong with her. Malachi's supposed partner was a young woman of 22 years of age, with pale skin and short black hair. Her bright violet eyes were half closed and unfocused as she stared out the window, her face showing a mixture of extreme drowsiness paired with sheer boredom. Both of her ears contained several silver piercings, and a pair of earbuds as well, which she seemed to have spray-painted black. As Serana had alluded, Annalise had a bit of a goth aesthetic paired with a rather tomboyish appearance. She wore a black hoodie with a skull on the back that seemed to be a few sizes too large for her, and her plump yet slender legs were being squeezed to death in a pair of ripped black jeans. On her feet, she wore black boots that had been painted with the names and initials of various bands and musicians, and they seemed to be fairly well made. Xi.Theta. Eventually, Annalise felt like she was being watched and found Malachi staring at her intently. She immediately became uncomfortable, as she had never had any interaction with Malachi before and didn't know why he would possibly be staring at her. Taking out her earbud, she gave Malachi a slightly irritated look that would normally be enough to scare anyone off. Can I help you with something? Why the hell are you staring at me so hard? You're my project partner. Mal said, unfazed by her unfriendly demeanor. Suddenly, Annalise made a face as if she'd just heard something dreadfully shocking. We have a project? Jesus. On the other side of town, Minoru was drunkenly stumbling out of a casino while mumbling profanities at the cheating machines. To him, there was no way that he shouldn't have won at least a few grand or so with all of his gambling skills and knowledge. The only logical explanation was that those crooks who ran the place were purposefully sabotaging him so that he could not collect what he so rightfully deserved. Doesn't matter, as long as I keep working for that asshole, then the money will never stop rolling in. BZZ. Just as Minoru crashed onto a nearby bench, his burner phone began to vibrate and he immediately knew who was calling. Pulling out the device, Minoru immediately tried to sober up and put on his most professional tone of voice. Ahem, hello Mr. Heller, how can I dash? It's over, you are no longer needed. Believing he may still have been inebriated, Minoru rubbed his eyes hard before requesting clarification. Sir, what are you dash? As of today, I am terminating our contract. You are an unneeded expense that I no longer require as I have found other methods to procure what I want. Suddenly, Minoru stood up and began yelling into the phone. Why you can't do this? What about severance pay or dash? On the other side of the line, Alex Heller burst into a fit of furious laughter. Ha 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 ha. Severance? You should be glad that I'm letting you keep your life. I'm in a good mood today, so do me a favor and don't fuck that up. Alex's tone suddenly became considerably less friendly as just hearing his voice sent chills down Minoru's spine. This is the last time we will ever converse. Dispose of the phone as you've been instructed and forget that you ever met me. If I find out you are talking to anyone that you shouldn't, then I am going to put you in the fucking ground. Before Minoru could utter a single word, the call disconnected for the last time and he was left alone once again. Damn it. He hurled the phone at the bench and it immediately broke apart into several pieces. This is all that bitch's fault. She made things so difficult for me that he cut me loose. What other explanation was there? If Sei had only welcomed him back with open arms, then none of this would have happened and Minoru would be rolling in money by now. You think you're hot shit just because some punk kid plays with your dirty old body. Reaching in his jacket, he pulled out a silver flask containing nothing but vodka. After taking a sizable gulp, he wiped his mouth as he vowed to teach her a lesson by any means. You think you're too good for me? I'll show you. Malachi and Annalise were walking out of class side by side. Neither of them had spoken a word to each other ever since that first exchange in class, and it didn't seem like either of them were going to speak to any time soon. The project for their psych class was interesting to say the least. As the professor explained earlier, the goal for this project was to observe and study your partner in their natural environment while doing their day-to-day activities. Be it work, other classes, or even hanging out with friends, their partner was supposed to observe them openly while putting together a comprehensive report on their behavior and personality. Annalise had never been so pissed off in her life. As soon as the professor said the details of the project, every girl in class started looking at her like she was their worst enemy. She already had a hard time fitting in due to her choice of style and appearance. Now that she was stuck with the dream guy of every girl on campus for the week, She felt like the small embers that represented her social life had been cruelly stomped out and shitted on. She could kiss the chances of ever making friends with any of those girls goodbye. Out of the corner of her eye, she glanced at Mal and analyzed him from top to bottom. While she could admit that he was handsome, she didn't understand why everyone in the world seemed to be going so crazy over him. Without the mention of his powers or wealth, Malachi just seemed like some average guy to her with no outshining characteristics. She figured she could probably write an entire paper on him after one day together. Mal noticed Annalise looking at him out of the corner of her eye and took that to mean that she was ready to start a conversation. "So Annalise, do you dash? Never call me that ever again," she said flatly. Luckily, Mal seemed immune to her frigid response and continued rolling like nothing had even happened. "Then what should I call you?" "Just Anna. Anything else feels too uppity and formal." Malachi nodded in understanding as the two of them continued their walk to the parking lot. "We have 6 days together, with 3 days to observe each other and 1 to write our paper. So how do you want to do this?" Anna sighed as she ran her hands through her short black hair. "We'll just knock it all out at once, I guess. I'll follow you around first and then you can do me." She then pulled out her phone and began punching in a few buttons before handing it over to the young man. "Give me your number and address. I'll try not to sell it to any paparazzi." Malachi chuckled and entered his information, assuming that this scary-looking girl was attempting to joke with him. She wasn't. These are tough times for a young college student, you know? Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Once she had Malachi's information, she walked away while waving without looking back. "I'll text you whenever I remember to." Malachi watched the young woman get into an older black car that was parked opposite of his. The engine soon sputtered to life and a moment later Mal could hear the sound of heavy metal reverberating from the speakers. Anna pulled out of the parking lot like a bat out of hell, leaving behind a slightly stunned Mal who was wearing a small smirk. She didn't really seem all that bad. "This project will probably go fine, right?" At Say's house, the mature beauty was laying in her bedroom upstairs and staring absent-mindedly at the ceiling. Visions and echoes of the passionate night she'd experienced with Malachi had left her lost in a daze for the past hour. No matter how much she thought back on it, she realized that there was a glaring issue with their lovemaking that she could not ignore. I will not be led on anymore. I have to make him feel good too." Sitting up, she went to her nightstand and grabbed her laptop and a pair of headphones. She had never done anything like this before, but her pride as an older woman had been wounded by allowing herself to be continuously led on by her boyfriend who wasn't even 21. She needed to learn some new tricks, anything to ensure that Mal was having great of a time during their lovemaking as she was. Typing in sex tips, she became slightly disappointed when all she found was advice columns from middle-aged couples having intimacy problems and podcasts hosted by former porn stars. What does porn look like anyway? She wondered. Her simple curiosity led her to jump down the internet's darkest rabbit hole, and soon she was immersed in more nasty videos than she could handle. As a fairly innocent woman, Say felt like her eyes had been opened to an entirely new world. She had a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, and as she went from video to video, they only multiplied. "Oh my. He put his tongue in her bottom? Milking. I still haven't seen anyone as large as Malachi. Neglect play? This just seems cruel. B bondage also seems like a bit too much. T threesome." Her mind filled with various images of herself, Luna, and Malachi all intertwined together on the bed. While she did not believe she was adverse to the idea, the truth was that she felt like she would need quite a bit of time to prepare for such a thing. This is all too much for me right now," she yelled with a red face. Say quickly closed out of her current video and took a small breather. "I just need something a bit more simple and intimate. I just want to use my body to show him how much I love him." She took a deep breath and ventured into a much more softcore section and found a video of a woman on top of a man. The woman in the video kissed the man intimately before making her way down his body. Say's eyes widened as she watched the woman in the video take the entirety of the man into her mouth without even breaking eye contact. The man began to release muffled groans and obscenities as he grabbed her hair and made her go faster. The longer Say watched, the more she felt like this was the most obvious solution. Malachi had used his mouth on her a number of times, and each instance made her see heaven and question if she was truly his first woman. Surely she could give him a similar experience if she only learned how to do it properly. With her goal decided, Say spent the next hour in a full deep dive into every blowjob video she could find. Instead of watching porn, she looked like she was studying for a college entrance exam. She took great care to study the tongue movements of the women, which spots produced the best reactions from the men, and most importantly how they were still able to breathe while nearly being choked to death. After a while, Say finally removed her headphones and let out a massive thoughtful sigh. As she sat there contemplating everything she had just learned, the strong scent of something burning wafted into her nose. A moment later, the blaring sound of a fire alarm going off assailed her ears. A few minutes ago, Minoru drunkenly stumbled out of his car and pulled on his hood to cover his face. Through his half-lidded eyes, he stared at a medium-sized two-story house that he recognized as his ex-wife's. He wouldn't have known where she lived without Alex Heller, as one of their possible schemes involved him randomly showing up at this address and pretending to have car trouble and a dead phone. At least that bastard was good for something. Minoru pulled on a pair of dark black gloves and reached in his back seat to take out a bottle of vodka and a dirty cloth. Unscrewing the cap, he quickly stuffed half of the cloth inside the bottle while making sure that it was securely in place. He took out a small silver lighter from his back pocket and lit the exposed end of the cloth on fire. Glancing upstairs, he smiled when he realized Say's bedroom lights were on, indicating she was home. "I hope you burn to death, you whore." Crash. Minoru hurled the Molotov cocktail right through Say's front window into her living room. He would have liked to stick around and watch her panic from his little gift, but he didn't want to risk being seen by anyone, so he had to run for now. Stumbling back into his vehicle, he pulled off like a drunken madman just as Say's living room caught on fire. When Say finally rushed downstairs, her entire living room was already engulfed in flames, and it was quickly traveling to the kitchen and dining area as well. Tears quickly filled her eyes as her mind ran at 1,000,000 miles a minute to process next steps. At the current rate the fire was spreading, the door to her home would soon be engulfed and she would have no way to escape. There was no back door, and the windows were much too small for her to climb through. Which meant if she was going to leave soon and call 911, she had an extremely limited amount of time to grab whatever was important and leave. With tears in her eyes and lungs that were quickly filling with smoke, Say opened up a closet door near her and pulled out her purse and a folder filled with important documents. She wished more than anything that she had time to grab more, but her window of opportunity seemed to be quickly closing, as the flames were already a few seconds away from reaching the front door. But just before she was about to leave, she remembered another important item in her household that she absolutely could not leave behind. The money. The $500,000 Malachi had received from Rowan as payment for killing Arthur was located in another closet on the other side of the room. After covering her mouth and nose with her shirt and clutching her things close to her chest, Say rushed to the closet without wasting another moment. Grabbing a blanket, she quickly threw it on top of the flames that had started to lick at the door and stamped it out. After throwing open the door and retrieving the duffel bag, Say ran directly for the front door of her home. Ag. She let out a cry of pain when she touched the burning hot doorknob and felt a searing heat travel through her palm. Wrenching open the door, she sprinted outside and threw herself onto her front lawn. Her hand was still stinging a bit and she hadn't fully caught her breath yet, but otherwise, she was fine. Say, is that you? Are you all right? From across the street, Say's neighbor Mr. Richards had noticed the fire and come out of his house to take a look. I am fine. Crawl as far away from the house as you can, all right? I've already called the fire department. Nodding in understanding, Say began to crawl all the way to the edge of her lawn before sitting up and resting against the mailbox. As she watched the fire continue to spread, the tears that she'd been holding back all this time finally fell freely and she was powerless to stop them. Why was this happening to her? She hadn't left any candles burning, or even cooked tonight for that matter. How could a fire just spring up in her living room out of nowhere? Say was so distraught, she did not notice a very familiar car pulling up along with the sound of sirens growing ever closer. Mom. Serena barely put her car in park before leaping out of the driver's seat and frantically throwing herself at her mother. Are you all right? What happened to the house? Say looked up at her daughter with tears still falling from her eyes and making the most heartbreaking face known to man. Serena, I don't. Say couldn't even finish her sentence before another round of choked sobs escaped her mouth. Distraught beyond belief, the mother-daughter pair said nothing as they cried and held each other for dear life. The two continued to cling to each other and act as their only comfort long after the fire department arrived to save the remnants of their house and treat Say's burn. At Malachi's apartment, the young man had just stepped out of the shower and began wiping his body down with a towel. After drying himself off and pulling on a pair of cozy house pants, he grabbed his phone to check his messages and frowned when he realized he hadn't heard back from Say yet. He'd texted her an hour ago to ask about her plans for the week, and she had yet to give a response. Normally Mel would not see this as a cause for concern, but his girlfriend typically always texted him back within 20 minutes unless she was either working or sleeping. Did she fall asleep? He wondered. Ding dong. Just as Mel prepared to use his powers to check on her, his doorbell rang and he lost his train of thought. Malachi raised a brow in confusion when he realized he had visitors at this time of night, but after a moment's thought he realized that there weren't very many people it could have been. Appearing at his front door, he opened it to find both Say and Serena with red puffy eyes, and a few personal items in their hands. Immediately recognizing something was wrong, his tone became soft and gentle as he allowed them both inside. Girls. Tell me what's the matter. Honey, can we stay with you for a little bit? Say asked gently, embarrassed to even be asking such a question. Next to her, Serena was biting her lip hard so as not to cry in front of Mal, and that look only tugged at his heartstrings even more. In the blink of an eye, he had pulled the both of them into his embrace and brought them inside. You girls are being silly. You should already know that I will do whatever I can for you. Thank you, honey. Thanks Malachi. The mother-daughter duo thought they'd thoroughly cried themselves into exhaustion tonight, but in Malachi's warm and caring embrace, they found that they still had a few more tears left to shed. Although, these tears contained something other than sadness or confusion, and it made the burden on their spirits much lighter. Relief. Sunlight had just begun to stream through the curtains in Malachi's bedroom and came dancing on the bodies of the two adults that were laying beneath the sheets. Mal had been awake for the last hour or so, yet he hadn't moved from his current position for even a second. His hand was still intertwined with the lightly bandaged one of his sleeping girlfriend, and he was more than a little reluctant to pull away. It had taken her forever to fall asleep last night, and Mal was worried that if she sensed that he was gone for even a second, she would wake up immediately. The longer he stared at her beautiful sleeping face and swollen eyes, the more sure he became that he couldn't leave this woman behind today. Holding out his hand, he called his phone over to himself using telekinesis and began to dial a number. It only took a moment for the phone to connect, and when it did, he immediately began to whisper lightly into the phone. Hey Luna. I don't think I'll be able to make it to training this morning. On the other line, Luna immediately became concerned as she knew Malachi well enough to know that he wasn't one to avoid his responsibilities. Are you all right? She asked worriedly. I'm fine, it's just. Some things came up and I have to take care of Say today. Luna's eyes became complicated as she leaned further back into her leather chair. All right. You'll still be able to participate in your dungeon raid in 2 days, won't you? Of course I will. I still have to redeem myself from that embarrassing first run. Fufufu, you did all right. Maybe so, but I want to give the women rooting for me a better show this time around. Oh? Might you be talking about all of your fans that showed up at the last event? I certainly appreciate the support, but nah. I only have 2 women who can motivate me like this. Oh? Aubrey and Aisha? I said women, not roaches. Luna could not help but giggle as she smiled like a woman madly in love. But despite how Mel's words made her feel, she knew that they were coming dangerously close to crossing the line she'd drawn between them. Mel, you. I'll see you tomorrow morning. With that, Luna hung up the phone and tossed it onto her desk. That boy, he's too dangerous for his own good. It took a few more minutes, but eventually Mel separated from Say and slipped out of bed. After freshening up inside the bathroom, he quietly tiptoed through his apartment to Aubrey's room where Serena was currently sleeping. Luckily, his younger sister spent most nights at her girlfriend's place nowadays, and she didn't mind Serena sleeping in her bed while she was gone. Mel's apartment had a spare bedroom and bathroom, but because he didn't know what to do with it until now, there wasn't anything in there. When we go shopping, I'll buy her a TV and a bed too. His plan for today was to take Say and Serena to the store and buy them whatever they needed. Almost 80% of their house caught fire last night, and while they didn't lose everything, it certainly felt like they had. Say was especially distraught to lose the house that had been gifted to her by a woman who was like her second mother, And even though Mal couldn't turn back time to save the house, he could replace the things that were in it. But there was a problem. He was 90% sure that Say was not going to simply allow him to spend an exorbitant amount of money on her in one day. She would want to wait for the insurance company to settle things, but something like that could take weeks, and Mal didn't want them to go without basic comforts for that long. Say didn't even have a phone anymore, as it had been left upstairs when the fire first started, leading Mal to his current plan of attack. He was in the kitchen, preparing a nice and hearty breakfast the likes of which Say would absolutely love. She wouldn't have the energy to argue with his generosity if her stomach was full. Epsilon. Or at least that was what he hoped. In the kitchen, Mal was whisking together a bowl full of eggs, buttermilk, and vanilla. Once everything was incorporated fully, he grabbed a whole loaf of brioche bread from the pantry and grabbed a knife to start cutting thick slices. In the midst of this, Mal suddenly paused when he sensed someone approaching his front door. Worried that they would ring the doorbell and wake the girls, he rushed to open the door before that could happen and was surprised by who he found. "Jesus, fuck, why don't you have a shirt on?" Anna asked with a red face. At that moment, Mal remembered that before Say and Serana showed up at his house, Anna had texted him to ask what time his day started and what he was going to be doing. When he told her how early he had to be at the guild, she left him on red, so he assumed that she wasn't going for it. But apparently that wasn't the case. Although the bags under her eyes and cup of coffee in her hand indicated that she wasn't doing this willingly. "Sorry, I'm just kinda always like this at home," he said apologetically. Mal then looked at what Anna was wearing and realized that she wasn't exactly one to talk. The tomboyish goth girl was wearing black sweatpants and socks with slides. Her dark hoodie was fully unzipped, allowing him to get a good look at her impressive chest that was covered by a sports bra from a famous brand. Mal could also see that she had quite a few tattoos that he hadn't noticed before, some were on her ribs and a few were on her delicate-looking fingers as well. "But should you really be talking? Your outfit isn't much better than mine." Anna looked down at her clothes in sheer confusion before tilting her head to indicate she didn't understand. "What's wrong with this?" "Nothing, never mind." Anna finally rolled her eyes and pushed past Mal into his apartment. Taking a look at her surroundings, her mood improved a small amount and she wasn't as grumpy as before. "Nice place. I'm really feeling the black floors." "Big shocker," Mal thought with a chuckle. "I'm glad you like it, but I've got some bad news." "Oh yeah? What?" "We're not going to the guild today. I have some other things to take care of." Almost immediately, Anna's face became ugly and Mal thought she was going to beat his ass. The look on her face was so scary that he had forgotten that she was still a regular human. Currently she looked more like a beautiful yet vengeful demon. "You got me up, at 7 in the morning, for nothing." "It wasn't intentional," Mal said sincerely. Yet Anna didn't seem to buy it for even a second. Her mind began to run at 1,000 miles a minute, and she realized the absurdity of this situation. "This was all a part of your plan, wasn't it?" "Come again?" "Having me show up at your place alone, opening the door shirtless, you just think I'm some easy little loner girl that you can play with as much as you like and then dump her onto the street when you're done." Malachi sighed before going into the laundry room and pulling on a simple sleeveless t-shirt. "You're being crazy. I'm not some sort of creep who would try to take advantage of you like that." "Oh? Then do you care to tell me why we're suddenly not going to your guild?" "Don't tell me it's 'cause you're embarrassed to be seen with me." Before Mal could respond, a sleepy yet sarcastic voice suddenly spoke. "Well, Mel. If I knew my house burning down was going to cause you this much trouble, I would have made sure that we kept a fire extinguisher around." Leaning sleepily against Aubrey's bedroom door was Serana, who seemed to have just woken up. "How are you feeling, little dude?" Mal asked gently. The young girl smiled bitterly when she heard Mal's tone that was still full of concerned affection, despite his annoying way of referring to her. "I'm fine, Malachi, you don't need to worry about me." Serana glanced at Anna and was briefly stunned by her great body and bold tattoos that were normally hidden by baggy black clothes. Did you say something about a house burning down?" Anna asked. "Yup, mine." "Oh. I'm sorry." Anna suddenly started looking back and forth between Malachi and Serana like she was putting pieces together. "So, this must be the reason why we aren't going to the guild today." "Pretty much." Mal nodded as he breezed past her to check on Serana. "Come into the kitchen, I'll make you some food." Suddenly, Serena's pink eyes that were showing pure exhaustion lit up as she followed behind Mal like a little duckling. Anna moved slowly behind them, but she was inwardly cursing herself for her previous assumptions about Malachi's motives. I can't believe I accused him of being such a sleazebag. I should apologize, right? Malachi's kitchen was located on a large island that was directly behind his living room. On one side there was a 6-burner stove that looked like every chef's dream, and on the other there was a bar with 6 stools where individuals could sit and watch whatever cooking was taking place. He invited the girls to either sit on the couch or at the bar as he resumed his task of making breakfast and was surprised when Serana sat right in front of him and gestured for Anna to sit next to her. You're Annalise, right? I'm Serana. Yeah, my friends just call me Anna. She said shyly. Oh, Anna's much better. Serana said with her usual friendly smile. Your tattoos are so pretty, I had no idea you had any. I guess I tend to keep them covered when I'm in class and stuff, though I'm not really sure why. Anna was distracted by the sound of the stove sparking to life and found Malachi looking like he was going to prepare a full spread. You cook? Anna asked, not even bothering to hide her surprise. When he offered Serana food, he thought he was just going to give her a Pop-Tart or something. I do what I can. Mal said with a shrug. He's just being annoyingly humble again as usual. Serana said while rolling her eyes. Mal's a great cook, and I fully intend to have him fatten me up a bit now that I'm staying here. Again, Anna felt like she had been completely caught off guard when it came to Mal. Weren't super rich guys supposed to have private chefs and sexy girls in maid outfits? Why was he so different? Mal paid the first part of Serana's words no mind as he continued to slice into the bread before dunking it into the egg mixture. It's a good thing we're going to get you new clothes today then. Serana's smile suddenly faded as she looked at Mal with a slightly painful expression. Mal, you know we can't let you dash. Shut it. MMMPH. MV right angles I upsilon dot theta. Malachi shoved a piece of dry bread into Serana's mouth to stop her from talking. I already know that I'm going to have to go to battle with your mom over this, so I can't waste that energy on small fry like you. Serana wanted to comment that she wasn't small fry, but the bread that had been stuffed into her mouth was really pillowy and delicious. Nom nom okay. With a smile, he continued focusing on his task as he dropped a pat of butter into a heated skillet. He's letting her mother stay here too? I knew that they were close from how they acted in class, but I didn't know they were this close. Anna thought in amazement. Sorry Anna, I know I had you get up early for no reason, and now I'm dragging you to the mall with us. The young girl sipped her coffee silently as she tried to avoid Mal's sincere gaze. It's no big deal, I didn't really have anything else to do anyways. The smell of food began wafting into the air and filled the nostrils of both girls. They stared in wonder at the slices of French toast on the griddle that had turned a mesmerizing golden brown, and their mouths began to water. Hey, you'll eat me have some too, right? Anna asked shyly. I'm not cruel enough to invite you into my home without feeding you. You can have as much as you want. In response, Anna's tattooed stomach let out a massive rumble and her cheeks reddened in embarrassment. You guys didn't hear that. I did. I have really good ears. As Serana and Malachi chuckled at Anna's expense, the door to Malachi's bedroom opened and a soft and sleepy voice played in their ears. Honey? Where did you go? When Say came into view, she was wearing the same outfit that she usually wore whenever she went to bed at Mal's house. An oversized t-shirt that went all the way to her thighs and black lace panties that were just out of sight. As the mesmerizing mature beauty rubbed the sleep out of her eyes, she realized that there was an additional person here whom she was unfamiliar with. Ah. Say immediately covered her chest and ran back to the bedroom, in the hopes of making herself look more presentable. When she left, Anna turned around to face Malachi with eyes as big as saucers. Who was that? My girlfriend. He answered. My mommy. Serana confirmed. Anna's head was on a constant swivel between the young man in front of her and the girl sitting next to her as she tried to process what she had just seen. He, with your mom, and you just. Geez, what's wrong with you? I thought the whole world knew about Mal's relationship with my mom by now. I don't get on social media much. Anna admitted. Then, that would make you her stepfather? She asked Malachi. Immediately, Malachi and Serana's faces became ugly as they stared at Anna like she'd just said something horrible. No, please don't use that term. Even if you're our friend now, we're putting you out if you say something like that again. Anna decided that maybe it was better if she just drank her coffee for the time being and did not say anything else. I really don't understand anything about these two at all. I'm sorry about earlier. I am Malachi's girlfriend and Surana's mother. It is very nice to meet you. Say said politely. It had taken the mature beauty all of 5 minutes to run back into Malachi's room and get changed into an outfit suitable for guests. Luckily, she kept a few spare clothes over at Mal's ever since they started spending the night together, and it seemed like that decision had come in handy. Anna stared at the woman opposite her, who was wearing a warm and radiant smile, despite the tired bags under her eyes. Unlike before, her body was now hidden behind a bright yellow sundress that emphasized her bold and seductive curves. In her 22 years of life, Anna could not recall ever meeting anyone quite so feminine and sexy. Realizing she'd probably been staring too long, I'm Anna. I'm their classmate and Malachi's partner for our project. Once the two shook hands, Say moved to stand beside her daughter and gave her an affectionate kiss on the forehead. You look like you slept just about as well as I did. Surana smiled helplessly in response as she returned her mother's hug. I think I was finally able to fall asleep around 3. But Aubrey's comfortable bed is the only reason I was even able to fall asleep at all. Well, do you have anything to do today? Maybe you should rest for the day, dear. If Surana was honest, there was nothing she would like more. But unfortunately, she had to work on her own project, and there was also the matter of Mal wanting to take them both shopping. It didn't seem like Mal was ready to talk about his plan with Say yet, so Surana just told her mother that she was too busy to rest and she seemed to accept it. Finally, Say found her way to Mal's side and leaned her head against his shoulder while watching him cook. Do you need any help? Of course, Malachi shook his head no, but that did not stop Say from helping him anyway. This girl. You're supposed to be resting. Say immediately blushed and did not comment. It would be too embarrassing of her to say that she did not feel like she could sleep unless Malachi was there, right? The two continued to cook in tandem, and Surana and Anna were both equally impressed by how well the two worked together. Sometimes, the two did not even have to say anything as they immediately knew what their significant other would need next or if they should clear space for them. I heard about your home. Anna suddenly said. I'm very sorry. Say gave her usual warm motherly smile, only now it contained hints of sadness. It's all right, it isn't your fault. Electrical fires are common with old houses. She said sweetly. Mal noticed how Surana's eyes became complicated and he smiled at her warmly. He figured she was still distraught over the loss of her home, so he decided not to make her wait for her meal any longer. All right girls, time to eat. With the food done, Malachi and Say presented it to the two eager-looking girls at the bar and their eyes practically lit up. Did we overdo it? Say asked. The couple had prepared French toast slathered in butter and syrup, bacon, grits, fruit salad and even eggs. Malachi briefly glanced at the two girls opposite him who had already begun to stuff their faces with little to no semblance of etiquette. Nah, I'm actually kinda worried we didn't make enough. As if to confirm his point, both girls made requests for more food. Surana, more French toast please. Anna, and eggs if you don't mind. Malachi chuckled and told Say that he would handle them while she finally sat down to eat. After getting some warm food in her stomach, Say's mood improved and she felt at peace for the first time since her house burned down. When about half of her plate was gone, Mal chose that moment to unveil to her his plans for the day. After you finish eating, I want you to rest for a little while longer and then I'll take you and Surana to the mall and we can try to replace everything you guys lost. Say's eyes became complicated and Malachi prepared himself for an intense debate. Square root. However, he nearly dropped the spatula in his hand when his girlfriend said the two words he least expected. Okay, honey. Okay? Okay. Say confirmed. Both Malachi and Surana stared at Say like she'd just grown a second head. Why didn't she refuse? Both Malachi and Surana had expected her to deny his offer firmly and spend the next several minutes arguing over it. Surana turned to Malachi in a crazed frenzy and immediately accused him of brainwashing her. Hey Mal. What did you do to my mother? Huh? I ain't do anything. Liar. Why else is she acting so agreeable all of a sudden? It's because you guys are having sex now, isn't it? Anna choked on the last remnants of bacon within her mouth, and Say's face became as red as an apple. That doesn't have anything to do with it, you brat. Mel argued. Then why is she suddenly so okay with everything you say? You must have digmatized her. Serana. That's enough. Say finally said. Her face was now so red that she was indistinguishable from a bottle of ketchup and she looked like she was going to die of embarrassment at any moment. Breakfast and a show, this place is great. Anna was no longer regretting the fact that she had to get up at such an unholy hour. The food she was chewing on and the entertaining scene in front of her made this all more than worth it. Mom, are you really okay with him spending so much money on us? Serana asked. Say nodded shyly, as if she wasn't fully comfortable with it herself. I know that he's not going to take no for an answer, and I can just pay him back when we get the settlement from the insurance company. He's not going to take it. Serana thought in annoyance. I'm not gonna take it. Malachi thought happily. He would have told her that directly, but he thought that if he brought that point up to her, then she would no longer accept his offer and things would become much more complicated. Suddenly, Say stood up from her seat and began heading back towards Mal's room. I don't need to rest, I'll just go and get ready. All right. If you say so. Once Say was back in Mal's room and shut the door, she let out a massive sigh of frustration. Truthfully, the reason why she did not fight Mal's request was because she already felt guilty. The truth was, she had lied to him about how the fire really started. Last night, the fire department had told her that the fire was intentional, and the cause was a Molotov cocktail that had been thrown through her front window. At first, she didn't believe it. Say didn't know anyone who would want to hurt her, and she certainly had never treated anyone unkindly. It seemed inconceivable that someone would want to do this to her. And yet, as she looked at her house that had gone up in flames, she knew it to be true. She had come up with the story that it was an electrical fire because she didn't want to worry Mal, or even worse, send him into a rage on her behalf. Serana seemed iffy on the whole idea, but after being persuaded by her mother, she also agreed to keep the cause a secret. For now, the two would just let the police investigate everything while they waited for this entire nightmare to end. But Say had not anticipated just how guilty lying to Mal would make her feel. The toll it had begun to take on her mind was a heavy one, and she did not know how much longer she could keep this from him. As she sat on the edge of the bed, a small tear fell from her tired eyes. True to her word, Say had allowed Malachi to take her and her daughter to the mall and purchase whatever they needed. Both girls received new wardrobes, in addition to some miscellaneous items like a new phone for Say and a bed and TV for what would become Serana's room. I want a PS5 too. She asked excitedly. No. Mal denied swiftly. Yeah? But I lost my old one in the fire. Serana put on her most pitiful puppy dog eyes for added effect and it appeared to be working. Mal glanced at Say for confirmation and when she shook her head no, Serana received a hard flick on the forehead. Ow. Nice try. Serana shot her mother a betrayed look only to receive an unbothered chuckle in return. As Mal spoke to the cashier to finalize the details of the delivery, their additional guest Anna found herself unable to take her eyes off his back. Serana soon came to her side, nursing a small red spot on her head where Mal had flicked her. Can you believe that brute? Treating a dainty thing like myself that way. Anna chuckled in response and decided not to tell her that she wasn't actually delicate herself. He must do this kind of thing a lot, huh? Anna asked as she watched Mal swipe his card without a care in the world. Hit me? Yeah, and I'm starting to get real fucking dash. And no, not that. Anna said as she tried to hold in a laugh. I mean spend thousands of dollars before noon. She had never seen anything like this. Mal had taken the girls to various clothing stores, a mattress store, and now they were inside of a place that sold electronics. And he was still asking Say if there was anything else she needed. Oh, that? No, this is pretty new, Mal's usually a cheap bastard. Once again, Anna was so surprised by a revelation that she nearly fell onto her face. Why you're kidding, right? He almost bought you a brand new console a second ago. Once again, Serana's cheeks puffed out as she remembered how close she was to getting that gaming system. I know, right? But of course my mom had to snitch and ruin Dash. Please focus. Anna said as she rubbed her temples. How can he be a cheap bastard if he just took your mom into a luxury clothing store 20 minutes ago? Serana was filled with irritation as she recalled how Mal had taken her mother to shop in Lucci and made her look inside of FAP. The young girl let out a frustrated sigh as she glanced at the backs of Mal and her mother. Well, Mal spent so long without any money that he has a lingering fear of not having any, so he can be really reluctant to spend money on himself. Most of the nice things he has are things that Aisha bought him. But when it comes to himself, he's normally pretty reluctant to spend more than $40. Suddenly, Surana realized that Mal had not complained even once about the amount of money they were spending. He let the two of them shop freely, and bought them whatever they asked for without batting an eye. For the first time, she understood just how much she and her mother meant to him. He had stuffed down his fear of poverty all for the goal of making the girls smile again and feel at home while they were staying with him. There weren't very many who would offer to do such a thing, which only made Malachi's enthusiasm during this ordeal all the more touching. While Anna was still in a daze from learning about Malachi's unexpected money habits, Surana made a surprising maneuver. Just as Malachi prepared to leave the store with 2 hands filled with bags, 2 slender arms suddenly wrapped around his midsection from behind. He immediately knew the culprit was Surana, although this unexpected action had left him horribly confused. A suplex? Is she that mad I didn't get her the damn console? But unlike what Mal expected, Surana had much kinder and gentler motives. Thank you, Mal. I really appreciate everything you're doing for us. Malachi relaxed considerably and let out a small laugh. Didn't think you had these kind of manners in you. Maybe you are your mother's daughter after all. Don't push it, fuckface. Ha ha ha. As Say looked at this heartwarming scene, her mind was once again flooded with unease and guilt. She clenched her hands behind her back as she tried her best not to show how distraught she felt inside. Keep it together. I shouldn't ruin this for him. After leaving the store, Malachi glanced around the expansive shopping mall to decide their next steps. Ignoring the small crowd of people that was following him discreetly, he figured that they had purchased just about everything the girls would need. Fishing in his pocket, he casually tossed his keys to Anna. Catch. Why are you giving me these? Can you and Surana bring the car around? Say and I will meet you guys in a second. He handed the bags in his hand to Surana and she took them with some difficulty. Both Anna and Surana stared hard at the keys in her palm as if they were contemplating going on a joyride. Eventually, the girls walked away from the couple while giggling madly and whispering between themselves. Normally, Mal would have stopped them and taken his keys back, but he currently had more pressing matters to deal with. He just said a silent prayer that they didn't destroy his precious car. All right, out with it. At his side, Say made a surprised expression that quickly turned into a forced smile. What do you mean, honey? You know, at first I thought that you were still upset about your home, but no matter how much I watch you, I keep feeling like there's something I'm missing. Knowing she'd been caught, the mature beauty was temporarily frozen as she wondered what she should do. After a moment of deep thought, Say decided she could not hold on to the secret anymore and pulled Malachi into a nearby bathroom away from prying eyes. Once the two were inside, she leaned against the wall and gave him a rather fragile look. Shrink. Mal immediately understood her demand and transformed into a small black cat that Say immediately took into her arms. She began to squeeze him lightly while pressing him against her chest to calm her raging heartbeat. I did something awful. I have been lying to you about how the fire started. It wasn't electrical. Malachi hadn't expected for this to be the focus of their discussion, but he did not comment and allowed her to get everything off her chest. The fire department, they said that it started because someone threw a bottle through the window. The police are still investigating, so we don't know who did it, but I'm sure that they'll find whoever did this, and I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. Within her arms, Malachi was trying his best to control his anger. His mind was embroiled within a storm of emotions, but he had to stuff those down for the moment and ensure that Say was okay. Why didn't you tell me? Malachi asked as gently as possible. He wasn't upset with Say for keeping this from him, but he was curious about her reasoning behind it. Say took a deep breath and began petting Mal's fur to calm herself down. I knew that you would want to find whoever was responsible, but I didn't want you to get angry on my behalf. Then what do you want? He asked calmly. Say placed Malachi back on the ground and allowed him to go back to his true appearance. She flung herself into his arms and a steady stream of tears began to fall from her face. I just want you to stay beside me and protect me. As someone tried to burn my house down and I don't even know why. I'm scared, honey. As Say let herself be vulnerable within Malachi's arms, he understood why she didn't want to tell him before. His reaction would have been terrible, and he would have torn the entire city apart while looking for the culprit. No matter the consequences. But what Sei needed the most wasn't an avenger, it was a protector. While the difference might not seem very large, the two were like heaven and earth. You don't have to be scared, I promise. I've got you, okay? Sei nodded shyly in acceptance, and the two brought their lips together in a warm embrace that contained all of their longing and affection. It seemed like the two were going to stay like that forever, until Mal suddenly broke their kiss and made a concerned face. Honey? What's the matter? Before Mal could answer, Sei heard it for herself. The sound of screaming coming from outside. Suddenly, a blaring alarm triggered throughout the mall, and Mal knew right away his suspicions were correct. There's been a gate break. Gate break. A term used to describe an event where monsters that lurk inside of gates suddenly enter the real world. They are generally pretty rare, and usually only take place when a gate has been left unattended for a long period of time. Once Malachi heard the blaring alarm that signaled the appearance of such a catastrophe, he immediately became serious. Sei, I'm sending you home right now. Malachi said. He immediately began to manipulate the shadows at her feet to send her right to their bedroom, and she knew that she only had a limited amount of time to say goodbye. Honey, please be careful. In the face of Sei's compassion, Malachi could not help but smile warmly at her. Always am. You know I have to come back to you. As Sei sank into the floor, she clutched her heart and finally said the words that had been buried within all of this time. I love you. As the shadows returned to normal and Malachi was once again left alone, a massive grin formed on his face. That's just not fair. You can't just say something like that in a situation like this. He made a silent vow to make her say it again later when they were alone. It's a good thing I bought Serana those headphones. Exiting the bathroom, the first thing that Mal noticed was that the mall was not the same as when he had left a minute ago. For starters, he was now fully immersed within a thick blizzard, the likes of which a southern boy like him had never experienced. Everywhere that he looked, snow had started to pile up on the tile floors and created a true winter wonderland. Run. There's a gate break. Out of my way. A large horde of people ran past Mal in a panicked frenzy. It didn't take him long to realize that everyone he saw was going in the opposite direction of the parking lot, which meant that was where the danger was. He immediately became worried about Serana and Anna, and his body changed on its own once again. Just like in his first dungeon, Malachi wanted the best characteristics of both man and feline. Only this time, the form he took changed to suit his environment. His height grew and his body expanded, yet instead of being 7 feet 3 inches and littered with muscles, he became 7 feet 0 inches and the muscles on his body compacted to make him look more lithe than normal. His traditionally sleek and black coat of fur became fuller and warmer, and it turned a silverish color with black spots. Only when his movie star good looks were replaced with the head of a snow leopard, was his new transformation finally complete. Mal hadn't noticed these changes yet, and right now, he couldn't really care less. All that mattered was that he find Serana and Anna at any cost. Dropping onto all fours, Mal's clawed hands and feet gouged out the ground beneath him as he bounded throughout the mall like a mad beast. It seemed like the mall had become mostly deserted, and the few people still rushing to get out could barely recognize what Mal was before he rushed past them. It didn't take him long to come across a group of the invaders. Icy giants that were over 8 feet tall, whose bodies were packed with sturdy muscle underneath bright blue skin. They wore nothing but animal pelts and ornaments made out of bone, and each one was currently preoccupied with the unfortunate humans they had caught. While the men were already being gnawed on as a snack, the women were being knocked out and piled up in the corner for gods know what purpose. Ruggiare Nat. The largest giant suddenly sensed something approaching at a very high speed. Its underlings stopped what they were doing and whirled around to see what their leader was pointing at, only to find nothing. Bang! Just as the giants were looking for the source of their leader's worry, his body hit the ground with a loud thud. They immediately went to his side to check on him, only to become alarmed when they realized he had no head. His body simply lay on the ground twitching as his neck spouted dark blue blood like a faucet. Yekla. The 4 remaining ice giants all formed a circle and pushed their backs against each other in a protective formation. Their eyes could only see so far with the blizzard ensuing around them, so even though they were aware that they were being hunted, they weren't sure what exactly was hunting them. Every now and then, they would see 2 tiny orange lights flash past them at a blinding speed before It seemed like they were going to continue this stalemate for forever, until there was finally a change in the battle. Shing! All the ice giants heard was the sound of a sharp object whistling through the air, before their legs and shoulders were suddenly pierced by silver knives. While their bodies were too dense for them to go terribly deep, that didn't mean it didn't hurt like hell. Grah! Arg! In the blink of an eye, the formation of the ice giants had been destroyed as they all attended to their own individual injuries. With a roar, Malachi finally revealed himself as he leapt into the mass of blue bodies. Reaching out for the nearest giant, he took a large furry fist and punched him in the back of the head so hard that his skull exploded from the impact. Before the body could even hit the ground, Mal had shifted his focus to the rest of the invaders. Mal landed on the back of a kneeling ice giant and took its massive head in between his paws. With a sickening wet crack, Mal twisted the neck of the giant and snuffed out its life with minimal effort. Kicking off its back, Mal performed a somersault in midair that carried him in front of another giant who was slowly recovering. Before it could even get back onto its feet, Mal pierced through its chest and pulled out an egregiously large, dark blue heart. Aubrey would never believe that this beast that was capable of such carnage was her older brother who used to be freaked out by raw turkeys on Thanksgiving. With one giant left, Malachi watched as it shakily got back to its feet. Unlike the others, this one had seen its kin annihilated at the hands of Malachi. It knew full well just how monstrous this beast was, and yet it understood that if it could rise to the challenge and slay such a creature, it could easily become a tribe leader. The ice giant picked up its weapon, a large club that looked like it was made out of ice and bone. With a harrowing war cry, the beast rushed forward into what was sure to be a legendary battle. Goo! The giant raised its club high in the air, before bringing it down to smash Malachi's head in. Bang! Mal caught the attack with unfair ease and held the giant's hand with an unshakable grip. As Malachi opened his mouth wide, the ice giant was able to get a good look at his enormous and sharp teeth before he bit into his arm. Grah! The ice giant let out a monstrous wail of pain as he struggled in pain to pull away from the still-chewing Malachi. The giant raised its free hand to deliver a swift punch and hopefully break Mal's grip, but Malachi caught that attack even easier than the first. You taste like shit. Mal muttered as he spit out the remnants of flesh from his mouth. Other than the strange influx of power he felt from eating this beast's flesh, this was an extremely unpleasant experience. Get back. Before the ice giant knew what happened, Mal had raised his leg and delivered a powerful kick to its midsection. Since Malachi was still holding onto his arms so tightly, the ice giant's limbs were ripped free from its body as the force behind Malachi's kick sent the rest of him flying into the air. Malachi threw the discarded limbs over his shoulder and immediately continued with his search. Taking a knee beside the bodies of the women, he quickly analyzed them to see if Serana or Anna was among them. When he realized that neither were present, his worries increased tenfold. With the ice giants and the freezing cold temperature inside the mall, he had to get to the girls quicker if he wanted to make sure they were okay. But first, he used the darkness surrounding him to teleport the unconscious women outside where they would hopefully warm up under the August sun and receive some help. After they were out of harm's way, he recalled all of his knives and slid them into the belt of his tattered pants. Wait for me girls, I'm coming as fast as I can. Serana and Anna were currently huddled together in the back of a clothing store. When the gate break had occurred, both girls had almost reached the exit when a large crack appeared in the space right in front of the doors. Before anyone could react, a bright blue portal opened up, and out from it poured a powerful blizzard and icy giants with bright blue skin. They of course tried to run like everyone else, but Anna unfortunately tripped and sprained her ankle after a few minutes of running. Unwilling to leave behind her new friend, Serana did her best to carry her to the exit, but it proved a futile effort. The giants were relentless, mowing down hordes of humans without a second thought as they single-mindedly pursued the duo of young girls. Anna's injury had caused the giants to see her as wounded prey, and she very quickly became the most desirable. Left with no choice, the two girls ran into the closest store they could find after some of the giants chasing them became distracted by slower humans. Luckily, the power had gone out in all of the chaos, so the girls now had a dark and somewhat safe space to hide in. Both girls were shivering horribly from the cold as they hid behind a counter all the way in the back. Anna was weeping silently, both from the pain of her ankle and the fear she felt from this hellish situation. How does a gate just open up in the middle of nowhere like that? And all of those people. Oh God. As Anna spiraled from seeing a massacre right in front of her, Serana was busy taking out her phone and trying to contact Malachi. It didn't take her very long to realize that she had absolutely no cell service and none of her calls or texts were making it through. Damn it. She muttered. Emotionally, she wasn't doing much better than Anna. It was taking all of her power not to panic as well, but she had faith that there was someone who could get them out of this situation. Serana finally noticed that the beautiful goth girl opposite her had been crying for a while now and moved closer to provide warmth and comfort. "It's okay," she whispered. "Malachi will come to save us in no time and we can leave all of this behind." Anna seemed to have forgotten about her project partner who also happened to be the world's most famous blessed, and it didn't take her very long for that information to slow her heartbeat down just a bit. But in the next moment, her heart was beating even faster than it was before. Crash! The sound of something breaking through a door was accompanied by slow and heavy footsteps. Both Anna and Serana's eyes became as wide as saucers as they covered their mouths to stop the sound of their breathing from coming out. Inside of the abandoned store were two ice giants, a male and a female. The two were stumbling around, knocking over mannequins and flipping over displays as they tried to follow the smell of frightened food. While their movements were unsteady at first, after a while they began to drift towards the back of the store where the two terrified girls were hiding. With every booming step, the shaking of the two girls became worse and worse. Before the girls knew it, the horrifying scene of two blue giants peering eerily over the counter played right in front of their eyes. Serana was so afraid she fainted on the spot, and Anna found herself unable to move even a single inch as the giant's hand inched closer to her. "Please, don't," she pleaded. Square root. Just before she was grabbed by the icy giant, a change finally occurred in the atmosphere. Suddenly, the giants turned around towards the destroyed entrance and found a pair of burning orange eyes peering through the wintry storm. "Chinpa?" "Shuring." Faster than the eye could follow, 10 bright silver flashes shot out from within the storm and found their way into the bodies of the giants. As the monsters went down, Malachi finally leapt into the store and began ripping the two limb from limb. Anna was still sitting behind the counter, scared out of her mind and unsure of what was happening, but by this point she was absolutely certain that she was going to die. After a few more seconds, the sound of fighting died down and the only sound left was off the fierce wind outside and Anna's thudding heartbeat. She contemplated whether or not it was safe to get up and was surprised when a large furry creature suddenly discovered their hiding spot. Normally Anna would have been afraid, but as she looked into those bright orange eyes, she felt a strange sense of relief instead. "I'm glad I found you girls. I was almost too late." The beast's voice was deep and monstrous, but there was a softness inside that Anna had come to know very well. "Mal. You know anyone else who can turn into a giant cat monster?" Malachi's bad joke didn't seem to have an effect as Anna shook her head sheepishly. Coming behind the counter, Mal reached out to take both of the pale and shaking girls into his arms. "Come on, let's get out of here." Anna tried to move, but her legs had unfortunately been reduced to jelly and she had realized something horribly embarrassing. In her immense fear earlier, she seemed to have lost control of her bladder and relieved herself all over the floor. Now she was caught between a rock and a hard place, with no way to escape from this monumental embarrassment. Luckily, Mel seemed to understand exactly what she was concerned about and immediately reassured her. "It's all right, I'm sure that you were terrified out of your mind, huh? I'm not childish enough to be disgusted with you for this, especially when it was my fault for taking so long." Mel gently reached out and placed his hands around Anna's waist. He lifted her up with minimal effort and shuffled all of her body weight onto one arm. His forearm was placed just underneath her butt, allowing him to have a firm yet appropriate grip on her without causing any awkwardness. With both of her arms wrapped around his neck, she looked a bit like a baby koala, the way she was clinging to him. After lifting up Serana and holding her the same way, Mal walked out of the store with both beauties in his arms. Despite the embarrassment she felt, Anna could not help but feel at peace from being so close to Malachi like this, and a small part of her wished to never leave. "Thank you for saving us, Mel," she whispered amongst the whistling winds of the snowstorm. She wasn't certain if he could hear her, but she felt like a weight had been removed from her chest after she said it. As she buried her face in the crook of his neck, she finally realized that she hadn't really felt cold ever since he picked her up. Seriously, how can someone be so warm? Malachi carried the girls out of the ruined store and promptly manipulated the shadows at his feet to take them home. Appearing in his apartment, he had a slight headache that was made worse by the frightened screaming of his girlfriend. "Kya! Boof! Before Mal could even respond, a pillow was thrown into his furry face and he was robbed of the opportunity. Eventually, Say realized that this large furry cat monster was carrying two very familiar-looking girls. "Ah. Honey?" she asked hesitantly. In response, Mal flashed her a toothy grin and placed Serana down onto the couch. "I gotta say, love, you have a hell of an arm. Must be from all that time you spent baking, huh?" Say smiled sheepishly in return and slowly put down the remote that she was going to throw at him next. She went beside her daughter and brushed the hair out of her face before asking about the status of the gate break as well as his new look. "What happened in the mall and, why are you white?" "Come again?" "She means your fur," Anna said gently. The young woman had yet to move from Malachi's grasp as she was still a bit traumatized and more comfortable than she wanted to admit out loud. Malachi finally noticed his winterized new look and attributed it to the climate he was just in. After taking a peek in a nearby mirror, he realized that he looked a bit like the main villain from the first Karate Koala movie. Cool. Anna finally realized that Mal had been trying to put her down for the past few minutes and crawled down from his arms with a slightly reddened face. "Say, can you grab a few spare clothes from my room?" he asked. "Oh? Okay honey, one moment." She quickly slipped into Malachi's room and left the two of them alone, allowing Malachi to show Anna where the nearest shower was without embarrassing her. He had to help her since she was still limping quite a bit, but since he could not follow her all the way into the bathroom, they had to separate once she closed the door. "Once you're finished, tell Say about your ankle and she'll get you some ice or even drive you to the doctor if you need it. I'll bring the clothes and put them outside." Anna said nothing for a long time as she let her body sink into the warm crystal clear water. "Thanks. You're going back, right?" Malachi let out a monstrous chuckle as he looked at his clawed hands. "Kinda have to, don't you think? These murder mittens ain't exactly made for sitting on the couch." Anna let out a dry laugh as she slicked back her wet hair. "Whatever, just be safe, kid." "Always am," Malachi said as he sank into the floor once more. Before he left, he couldn't help but feel like he'd misjudged his new friend quite a bit. "She acts all tough on the outside, but she's quite the softie, huh? That's cute." Yenyer. When Malachi reappeared in the mall, the first thing he did was double over in pain. The headache that was only mild a few minutes ago was now much more intense and felt like it was traveling throughout the entirety of his brain. What the hell is this? In all of Malachi's life, he had only felt pain like this once before. It was when he'd first received all of his blessings and they ran uninhibited across his mind and soul. For the first time, Mal pieced together the absurdity of everything that he'd done today. Never before had he been able to use two of his blessings simultaneously, but just a moment ago he had been using shadow movement on himself and others without even realizing it. And he still had yet to deactivate Bastet's blessing that was making him so monstrous. He scoured his mind for any sort of answer to this sudden development, and he very quickly was able to reach a conclusion. Monster meat. After eating the flesh of the scorpion woman and the ice giants, his body was flooded with a new energy that he hadn't ever felt before. At first, he'd thought that there were no additional benefits other than increased speed and strength, but now it seemed like there was much more to it than that. Irregardless of his current predicament, Mal knew that there was only one logical course of action. Moving back to his feet, he ventured back into the ruined store where he'd first found the girls. Picking up a piece of a shredded ice giant, he placed it between his monstrous teeth and began to chew on it to prove his theory. While his headache was relieved, he did not gain the traditional rush of power that he normally would from eating dungeon beasts. Been dead too long, huh? Whatever magical substance gave him such a large energy boost, it seemed as though it was time-sensitive, making hunting for fresh food his only viable option. Returning onto all fours, Malachi bounded throughout the mall while searching for more giants. After a round of non-stop running, Mal found the enemies that he was searching for, but he very nearly wished he hadn't. The good news was that Mal had reached the source of the gate break and there were only 3 monsters in his way. The bad news was that there was very clearly a boss monster among them. Seated between 2 snowy white dire wolves was an ice giant that was different from the rest on almost every level. It was considerably larger, almost 12 feet in height. The muscles on its body were much bulkier and taut than its brethren, and Mal knew at a single glance that his daggers were going to bounce right off its skin. The ice giant boss finally noticed something was approaching and stood up while pulling out an enormous icy hammer. It smiled and revealed teeth that were stained red and contained pieces of what Mal only hoped was beef in between. Malachi recognized that the beast seemed to be anticipating his challenge and dropped onto all fours so as not to keep his new friend waiting. Just as he prepared to have this creature for lunch, a soft and sultry voice, that he knew all too well, began to tickle his ears. "You weren't thinking about taking that thing on by yourself, were you?" Mal had always found Luna Autumn to be incredibly beautiful. But as she stood before him right now, he could not help but find her even more enchanting than before. Her usual loose and frilly kimono had been discarded and traded in for a set of tactical clothes. She wore simple black combat pants that were tucked into a pair of dark boots. Her upper body consisted of a long-sleeved black shirt with a sleek metallic vest covering up her large chest. The milky white hair that she was famous for had been restrained into a beautiful French braid that hung delicately off her shoulder. But the greatest surprises for Mal were the fluffy fox ears on top of her head and 9 swaying tails behind her back. Without even meaning to, Luna had left her young protégé completely starstruck. "Damn." Luna let out an amused giggle as she covered her mouth with her clawed fingers. "Are you saying that because I caught you about to do something foolish or because you like my appearance?" "Like doesn't quite cut it," he muttered under his breath. With Luna's new appendages on top of her head, she of course heard him and her heart began to flutter with excitement. Grove. The pair were suddenly reminded of their less than friendly surroundings as their ears were filled with the roaring of the now irritable ice giant. "I nearly forgot that we weren't alone." "That's a bit embarrassing," Luna thought shyly. The bewitching guild master glanced overhead at the glass ceiling that was separating them from the outside world. "Hey Mal, think you could help me out here a bit?" she asked as she pointed to the sky. It didn't take him very long to grasp her meaning, and soon enough his body was returning back to its normal appearance. He thought he'd feel a bit colder since his shirt had been ripped after transforming, but strangely enough, he found that it was actually rather bearable. Closing his eyes and taking a deep breath, Mal focused on his connection to Nyx and allowed his consciousness to drift off into the night. The sky darkened overhead and Luna smiled at its beauty before her eyes began to glow a bright pink color. A shining full moon appeared in the sky overhead, filling Luna with a renewed energy. "Much better. I believe that I work best in environments where I am most comfortable." Mal watched in awe as Luna held out her delicate hands and a scythe made of pure moonlight appeared in her grasp. "Can you leave this to me? It's been a while since I've done any field work and I wanted to play with the boss a bit." Malachi was so mesmerized by her appearance, he almost agreed to her insane proposal without so much as a second thought. "Hold up, you won't let me take on the boss myself, but it's fine if you do it?" As a response, Luna flashed him a bright smile containing pointed teeth that very nearly made his heart skip a beat. "But of course, I am SS ranked after all. Do you think that's just for show?" Before Mal could respond, Luna moved faster than his eyes could follow and rushed toward the boss. Taking a giant leap into the air, she twirled her scythe around in her hand before executing a downward slash onto the head of the blue giant. Row. Surprisingly, the lumbering behemoth was able to keep up with Luna's impressive speed and raised its own hammer in defense, but its efforts would prove to be wholly ineffective. Luna's scythe of light cut through the icy hammer as if it were made of butter, and her attack continued its destructive path free of obstacles. The giant let out an agonizing roar as its right eye was ruined beyond repair. The kitsune did not remove her weapon from the face of her enemy and instead let gravity pull her body downwards, allowing her to carve a straight path down the giant's face. Blood flowed like a river, and yet Luna remained perfectly unblemished among the cascade of red water as she plotted her next steps. Looking below, she could see the 2 icy dire wolves baring their fangs at her and snapping their powerful jaws menacingly, but she honestly couldn't have cared less. Kicking off the body of the giant, Luna gracefully flipped in midair before giving Mal a show that he would recall for the rest of his life. The bewitching fox woman began to hover in the air, and held out her palms as 9 blue flames appeared over each of her white tails. She smirked at the sight of the frenzied dire wolves rushing at her with hatred in their eyes. The flames from her tails floated towards her outstretched palms, and a burning bow made of nothing but bright blue fire was created on the spot. Drawing back the bowstring, 3 fiery arrows appeared magically within her bow, and once she released the string from her fingertips, they were all sent flying. 2 buried themselves in the foreheads of the icy dire wolves. The 3rd traveled all the way between the eyes of the still reeling ice giant, and all 3 creatures came to a dead stop. Luna sighed in relief and let her body float back down to the ground where she landed a few feet away from a stunned Malachi. She couldn't help but smirk as she saw the stunned look on his face, and a sense of pride began to well up from within her chest. In her entire life, she had received a lot of looks from a lot of different men, and had thought herself used to it by now. But somehow the look that Mal was giving her now was different from all of them, and she didn't quite understand why at first. But after a moment, she remembered a conversation that she'd had with Say about one of the reasons why she fell in love with Malachi. It was the way he looked at her when they were alone, as if there was no one in the world above or equal to her in terms of beauty or importance. Now I understand what she meant. No wonder she has already fallen so far. It's rude to just stare at me like that, you know? Luna said with a joking smile. You could at least tell me what you thought of my performance. Luna's transformation finally became undone and the tattoo on her forehead began to glow with a bright light. A small white fox jumped directly out of her tattoo and grew to its normal cute size, before finding its usual place in Luna's arms. Hue! Boom! 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 The arrows embedded within the heads of the icy enemies finally exploded, and 3 columns of bright blue fire swallowed their bodies whole. Standing in front of 3 pillars of flame and lovingly stroking her pet, Luna looked nothing short of mesmerizing and left Mal able to form a complete sentence. Damn. Once Mal was able to recover from his Luna-induced stupor, he inquired about the circumstances behind her appearance and was surprised that his girlfriend was the main culprit. After Malachi sent her home, Say immediately pulled out her phone and contacted Luna to inform her about everything that had happened at the mall and the fact that he was still on the scene. Because gate breaks are wholly unpredictable and no one can be quite sure what will emerge, both girls were admittedly very worried and it was decided that Luna would suit up personally to check on him. Currently, the two of them were standing side by side as they supervised the mall cleanup. After the dungeon boss was defeated, the crack that they originated from finally closed up and the blizzard finally ceased to blow. Despite that, the piles of snow didn't fade away just because the blizzard was no more and the mall still resembled a snowy mountain peak. Luna was still replaying the testimony of the survivors in her mind, and she could barely believe what she'd heard. A gate break appearing out of thin air. This is insane. She mumbled as she finally freed her hair from its braided appearance. At her side, Malachi's face looked to be equally serious. Luna, did I ever tell you what happened the night I got blessed? Surprised by this turn of events, Luna looked at Mal like she didn't understand where he was going with this. You haven't, tell me about it. After I received all of my blessings, Raijin was seemingly worried about me becoming overconfident and warned me not to be complacent. He spoke of worse things that lie beyond the gates, and I can't help but feel like these spontaneous breaks are only a harbinger of the worst things that will come. Luna looked to be struggling with this sudden revelation, and it took a few moments for her usual icy composure to return. Do you believe that these worst things will be limited to spontaneous gate breaks, or could there be something else? Malachi did not answer immediately and instead held out his hand to produce a small golden flame. He controlled the fire to melt the lingering snow around them while thinking hard about how to answer without scaring her. You know, I usually like to be optimistic, but I'm honestly expecting the worst-case scenario. Luna nodded and took a moment to begin formulating plans. If their world was going to be overrun by creatures they had no comprehension of, then that meant they needed to make sure that certain insurances were taken out in advance. In the midst of her mental calculations, a sudden question surfaced in her mind. Am I the only one you've told about this? Malachi nodded as he continued to absent-mindedly melt the snow around them. I had planned to tell you and all of the girls together. I wanted to prepare you for the idea that this life that we live now might all come to an end someday. Say, Aubrey, Aisha, Surana, he had intended to tell all of them quite a while ago, but he couldn't for fear of scaring them. It may have been a selfish delusion on his part, but Mal wanted the girls to enjoy mundane lives and problems for as long as they could before pulling the rug out from underneath them. In a rare moment of boldness, Luna intertwined her hand with Mal's and gave him a confident and warm smile. Thank you for telling me. Now at least you do not have to carry such a massive burden alone. Mal smirked in response as he kissed the back of Luna's hand and earned a small blush from her. Burden, huh, he said thoughtfully. Maybe it was, but I don't particularly mind carrying things like that if it means my loved ones don't have to. What's the point of all of this power if I cannot protect them from the things that go bump in the night? Luna had expected Mal to say something like that, but she couldn't help but find his desire to help others rather sad in that moment. I understand why you feel like that, Mel. I know how hard the past few years have been for you and your sister, and I know all of the sacrifices that you've had to make. Malachi's eyes became a bit distant as he recalled those unpleasant memories of working himself to the bone as a method to make ends meet, also that his kid sister would not have to worry about suddenly becoming homeless in addition to losing her parents. I have no doubt that when the apocalypse does come, you will fight alone on the front lines to defend this world and all that you hold dear. Square root epsilon dot. And you will die, like an idiot. She finished. You are just a ray of sunshine, aren't you? I like to think I am, yes. Luna replied with a smirk. Humans are social creatures by default, and we accomplish more when we all work together towards a goal greater than ourselves. It can be easy for us to forget because of our powers, but we blessed are still human, Mel. That means that we can fall prey to fatigue, exhaustion, and even death due to overwork. Luna suddenly brought her hand up to Mel's cheek and tenderly ran her fingers across it. You may be special, but you have to learn to let others help you when you need it. You can be the quarterback if you like, but if you have no lineman to defend you, then how are you ever going to win a game? You watch football? I'm a season ticket holder with the Bengals. God, you're hot. Please focus. Luna chuckled and suddenly began pulling on Mel's cheek. You shouldn't try to carry all of the world's burdens on your own, no matter what the reason may be. You'll only make the women who love you worry needlessly. Mel suddenly stopped smiling as he looked at Luna with an expression of genuine curiosity. The women who love me, huh? That include you by any chance? The white-haired beauty suddenly looked slightly embarrassed and Mel thought that maybe she was not going to answer him. But after a few seconds, she parted her lips to give an honest answer. I cannot say but. I do know that this is the first time I have felt like this in a very long time. For a moment, the two simply stared at each other without speaking as they became unaware of the world around them. It seemed like the two were going to close in for their very first kiss when they both became aware of an eerie silence. All around them, members of Immortal Moon were staring at the two with expressions that ranged from OMG, really, to it's about damn time. Embarrassed, the two quickly put a distance of 5 feet between each other and tried to return to some sense of normalcy. Think they'll go all the way this year? Mel suddenly asked. Luna's expression suddenly became ugly as she immediately understood what Mel was talking about. Hell no. Burrow doesn't have enough help. Ha ha ha. Back at Malachi's apartment, Say was seated comfortably on the couch while smiling at the scene in front of her. After getting out of the bath, Anna declined Say's offer to be driven to a medical facility and instead requested only an ice pack. Once it was administered, she fell asleep on the couch next to a lightly snoring Serana. Both girls seemed to be tired beyond belief, and Say couldn't help but wonder when the last time she'd seen her daughter with a girlfriend around her age. I should take a picture of this to tease her later. Say thought in amusement. Pulling out her phone, she had just opened the camera and prepared to take a picture when her device suddenly began to vibrate and she received a phone call that she had been anxiously awaiting. Say took several deep breaths to calm her raging heartbeat as she stared at the police station that was only a few feet away. A few hours ago, she had received a call from the local police department saying that there had been a development in her case. She had hardly expected the investigation to bear fruit this soon, and she would be lying if she said that she did not wish for it to take a bit more time so that she could mentally prepare herself. As such, she really had no other option but to bring in some reinforcements for moral support. A large and warm hand suddenly wrapped around her own and her mood immediately showed signs of improvement. We're here for you, love. Let's just go and hear what they have to say. Malachi comforted. Thank you, honey. I know that I'm being silly. Say said with a helpless smile. Don't worry, Mom. Serana piped up from the back seat. Hopefully they'll tell us that they caught the bastard and we can have Mal set him on fire as payback. Did you just volunteer me to roast a man alive? Yeah, why? Did you want to shock him to death instead? Say smiled and held in a laugh that she felt would be inappropriate. In all honesty, she wasn't expecting her daughter to be interested in coming after everything that she had gone through today, but after Anna left, Serana decided that there was no better place for her to be than by her mother's side. Excuse me, but, should I really be here for this? All eyes drifted towards Luna, who was sitting awkwardly in the back seat, next to Serana. Well, I know it might seem strange, but you are sort of my only friend. I was just sort of desperate to have all of the support I could get. Say said sheepishly. Friend. That one word seemed to echo in Luna's mind endlessly. How long had it been since she'd had a genuine friend? Had she ever had one? Say's warm and gentle demeanor had completely melted away all of Luna's hesitation with minimal effort. I see. I am happy to support you then. Even though she appeared to be rather aloof on the outside, both Malachi and Say could notice a twinkle in Luna's eyes that conveyed how pleased she was with this situation. She didn't even seem to care about the massive pile of paperwork at headquarters that was waiting for her patiently. Say finally let out one final sigh before she gave everyone a small nod and stepped out of the car. She and Malachi walked through the parking lot hand in hand, earning a look of jealousy from Luna and a look of disgust from Serana. Needless to say, as soon as the group entered the police station, they immediately had every pair of eyes glued to them. It wasn't every day that two of the world's most famous blessed walked into your job, and the sight of Luna in street clothes was more than enough to give most of the male officers nosebleeds. Luckily, one officer was not as scatterbrained as the rest and immediately ran up to the visitors once they recognized Say among them. Chloe Espinoza was the lead detective on this case, and she was the one who had contacted Say earlier. She was a woman of average height and build, with a stern yet slightly attractive face and blonde hair that was restrained into a ponytail. Ms. Ehara? We spoke over the phone earlier. I'm the detective in charge of your case. Ah, right. Hello. Chloe briefly glanced at Say's entourage and wondered if she should ask for a photo. But since she was nothing if not professional, she elected to forego such unnecessary things and led her to an empty room and had her take a seat. Under the detective's left arm was a folder containing a stack of papers, and she seemed rather reluctant to give them to Say. I should start by saying this: discovering the identity of the culprit was rather easy since he didn't avoid traffic cameras, and his crime was recorded by your neighbor's doorbell camera. Say nodded slowly as she tried to calm her thumping heartbeat. Alright, who is the culprit? Detective Chloe sighed and glanced at Malachi and Serana to gauge what their reaction to this news would be. Mal seemed to only care about Say's well-being, meanwhile Serana had been cracking her knuckles this whole time as if she was ready to retaliate. It was your ex-husband. Minoru Ehara. The silence was deafening. Absolutely no one had expected this answer, and the shocked looks on each of their faces were downright identical. That fucker. Bang. Serana was so enraged she was trembling as she lashed out at a nearby wall. I knew I should have done more than just kick him in the nuts. I should have ground them into paste. She did what now? Chloe decided to overlook Serana's admission of assault since she was clearly in great distress. She took a glance at Say and saw that not only was she frozen, but she was staring off into space as well. Chloe looked at Malachi and Luna for help, and they immediately shook off their own stupor and placed a hand on Say's shoulder. Finally, she seemed to regain some sense of clarity as she realized that she had indeed been spacing out. She met the eyes of both Luna and Mal and gave them a reassuring smile that neither of them believed. Say turned back to face the detective and tried her best not to show just how much this news was getting to her. I see, then, have you already arrested him? I hope you stuck him in a cell with the biggest inmate in here and gave him the slipperiest bar of soap you got. Serana yelled. Luna decided that maybe it would be better if the young girl wasn't present for this conversation and took her hand to guide her outside. Come on, kiddo. We'll step outside and take a breather for a minute. Despite her fuming, Serana did not resist Luna's grip and followed her outside quietly. That left the three rational adults in the room alone, embroiled in an even greater silence than the one that plagued them before. Regarding the arrest of the perp, Chloe sighed when she realized they'd gotten to the part of the meeting she'd been dreading the most. We cannot do that. What? Why? Malachi had done remarkably well so far. He hadn't said a word and he hadn't showed any traces of anger, only concern and disbelief. But he had finally slipped up, and his teeth had lengthened and become sharper like that of a wild animal. Even though his demeanor was still non-threatening, the sight of his wild teeth and eyes sent a wave of fear down Chloe's spine and she simply tossed them the folder she'd been holding on to all this time. Malachi and Say opened it together, and when they saw what was inside their hearts simultaneously dropped. We can't arrest him because he's already dead. I'm sorry. Say took several deep breaths to calm her raging heartbeat as she stared at the police station that was only a few feet away. A few hours ago, she had received a call from the local police department saying that there had been a development in her case. She had hardly expected the investigation to bear fruit this soon, and she would be lying if she said that she did not wish for it to take a bit more time so that she could mentally prepare herself. As such, she really had no other option but to bring in some reinforcements for moral support. A large and warm hand suddenly wrapped around her own and her mood immediately showed signs of improvement. "We're here for you, love. Let's just go and hear what they have to say," Malachi comforted. "Thank you, honey. I know that I'm being silly," Say said with a helpless smile. "Don't worry, Mom," Serana piped up from the back seat. "Hopefully they'll tell us that they caught the bastard and we can have Mal set him on fire as payback." "Did you just volunteer me to roast a man alive?" "Yeah, why? Did you want to shock him to death instead?" Say smiled and held in a laugh that she felt would be inappropriate. In all honesty, she wasn't expecting her daughter to be interested in coming after everything that she had gone through today, but after Anna left, Serana decided that there was no better place for her to be than by her mother's side. "Excuse me, but, should I really be here for this?" All eyes drifted towards Luna, who was sitting awkwardly in the back seat, next to Serana. Well, I know it might seem strange, but you are sort of my only friend. I was just sort of desperate to have all of the support I could get," Say said sheepishly. Friend. That one word seemed to echo in Luna's mind endlessly. How long had it been since she'd had a genuine friend? Had she ever had one? Say's warm and gentle demeanor had completely melted away all of Luna's hesitation with minimal effort. "I see. I am happy to support you then." Even though she appeared to be rather aloof on the outside, both Malachi and Say could notice a twinkle in Luna's eyes that conveyed how pleased she was with this situation. She didn't even seem to care about the massive pile of paperwork at headquarters that was waiting for her patiently. Say finally let out one final sigh before she gave everyone a small nod and stepped out of the car. She and Malachi walked through the parking lot hand in hand, earning a look of jealousy from Luna and a look of disgust from Serana. Needless to say, as soon as the group entered the police station, they immediately had every pair of eyes glued to them. It wasn't every day that two of the world's most famous blessed walked into your job, and the sight of Luna in street clothes was more than enough to give most of the male officers nosebleeds. Luckily, one officer was not as scatterbrained as the rest and immediately ran up to the visitors once they recognized Say among them. Chloe Espinoza was the lead detective on this case, and she was the one who had contacted Say earlier. She was a woman of average height and build, with a stern yet slightly attractive face and blonde hair that was restrained into a ponytail. "Ms. Ehara? We spoke over the phone earlier. I'm the detective in charge of your case." "Ah, right. Hello." Chloe briefly glanced at Say's entourage and wondered if she should ask for a photo. But since she was nothing if not professional, she elected to forego such unnecessary things and led her to an empty room and had her take a seat. Under the detective's left arm was a folder containing a stack of papers, and she seemed rather reluctant to give them to Say. "I should start by saying this, discovering the identity of the culprit was rather easy since he didn't avoid traffic cameras, and his crime was recorded by your neighbor's doorbell camera." Say nodded slowly as she tried to calm her thumping heartbeat. "Alright, who is the culprit?" Detective Chloe sighed and glanced at Malachi and Serana to gauge what their reaction to this news would be. Mal seemed to only care about Say's well-being, meanwhile Serana had been cracking her knuckles this whole time as if she was ready to retaliate. "It was your ex-husband, Minoru Ehara." The silence was deafening. Absolutely no one had expected this answer, and the shocked looks on each of their faces were downright identical. "That fucker." Bang. Serana was so enraged she was trembling as she lashed out at a nearby wall. "I knew I should have done more than just kick him in the nuts. I should have ground them into paste." She did what now? Chloe decided to overlook Serana's admission of assault since she was clearly in great distress. She took a glance at Say and saw that not only was she frozen, but she was staring off into space as well. Chloe looked at Malachi and Luna for help, and they immediately shook off their own stupor and placed a hand on Say's shoulder. Finally, she seemed to regain some sense of clarity as she realized that she had indeed been spacing out. She met the eyes of both Luna and Mal and gave them a reassuring smile that neither of them believed. Say turned back to face the detective and tried her best not to show just how much this news was getting to her. I see, then, have you already arrested him? I hope you stuck him in a cell with the biggest inmate in here and gave him the slipperiest bar of soap you got." Serana yelled. Luna decided that maybe it would be better if the young girl wasn't present for this conversation and took her hand to guide her outside. Come on, kiddo. We'll step outside and take a breather for a minute. Despite her fuming, Serana did not resist Luna's grip and followed her outside quietly. That left the three rational adults in the room alone, embroiled in an even greater silence than the one that plagued them before. Regarding the arrest of the perp, Chloe sighed when she realized they'd gotten to the part of the meeting she'd been dreading the most. We cannot do that. What? Why? Malachi had done remarkably well so far. He hadn't said a word and he hadn't showed any traces of anger, only concern and disbelief. But he had finally slipped up, and his teeth had lengthened and become sharper like that of a wild animal. Even though his demeanor was still non-threatening, the sight of his wild teeth and eyes sent a wave of fear down Chloe's spine and she simply tossed them the folder she'd been holding on to all this time. Malachi and Say opened it together, and when they saw what was inside their hearts simultaneously dropped. We can't arrest him because he's already dead. I'm sorry,